My name is Cindy, a 35-year-old office worker. I met my husband Joe through a colleague at work, sort of a blind date, and we ended up getting married. Joe and I are the same age and share similar hobbies, so I anticipated a joyful life together. Joe's parents were cheerful and kind. My mother-in-law once said, "We were worried because Joe hadn't brought home a single potential bride until now. Please take good care of Joe." Her words stung a bit, considering I'm his age too, but I chose to ignore it. A year has passed since our wedding. Though we sometimes argued, and Joe would often bring up divorce during those moments, I thought it was just part of married life. Despite this, we generally got along well. On weekends, we enjoyed driving and taking day trips, a hobby we had shared even before getting married. While I used to travel alone frequently, we now did everything as a couple. Joe lived with his parents until we got married, using their car when he went out. Since then, we've been using my car, which is nearing its end. I originally drove a compact car because I liked the design and rarely had passengers, but I was now considering buying a new one before the next inspection. When I discussed this with Joe, he agreed, saying, "It's your car, so do as you like. But if you're going to replace it, why not get a larger car instead of a compact?" I agreed with his suggestion. The following weekend, we went to look at cars together. As we began looking at cars, Joe grew increasingly excited. He pointed out an expensive model, praising its performance, spacious interior, and overall quality. Despite its appeal, I hesitated due to the high costs, which I hadn't planned for. Joe suggested, "How about I take out a loan in my name? We both drive about the same amount, and the payments would come from our household budget." Although it didn't matter who took the loan, his suggestion seemed practical, and we decided to explore that option. We looked at other cars, but we liked the first one best and decided on it. However, the loan application in Joe's name was denied, likely because he had just changed jobs. Joe became angry and snapped at the clerk, "I'm saying I'll buy it. Can't you do something about it?" This is one of the things I dislike about Joe. He often has a condescending attitude towards staff, no matter the store. When I tried to calm him down, he got upset and went outside to smoke. Joe can be domineering and quick to threaten divorce when things don't go his way, which is exhausting. I apologized profusely to the salesperson. Maybe it would be easier to get a loan for a smaller amount. If the car is cheaper, I could pay in full, I suggested while consulting with the salesperson. Just then, Joe returned. "Hey, why not buy it under Cindy's name? I'll be the one paying anyway," he said, leaving me to ponder the situation. Actually, I found Joe's suggestion appealing. None of the other cars resonated with me the same way. I nodded and signed the documents. They said it would take a few months for the car to be delivered. In the meantime, I drove around in my old car, cherishing our last moments together. One day, as my husband sat in the passenger seat, fiddling with his smartphone, he remarked, "Finally bidding farewell to this cramped space, huh?" During the drive, I let him take the wheel and casually glanced at his phone left on the dashboard. A message caught my eye. "Did you get a new car? And it's a luxury car at that." It was from one of Joe's colleagues. Joe seemed to be showing off our new car. Given his vanity, he likely hadn't mentioned that the car was purchased under my name. Though I thought it mattered, this car ultimately changed our fate. 3 months later, the first place we went in our newly delivered car was to my in-laws' house. We visited to celebrate my father-in-law's retirement, a visit my husband always emphasized as important to honor his parents. When my father-in-law greeted us, he excitedly examined the car and exclaimed, "So this is the new car. It's so cool." I suggested, "Let's go out together in it next time," to which he responded with delight. My mother-in-law also chimed in, "I want to go too. How about a spa trip?" She seemed excited, so I started making plans, taking their wishes into account. At my in-laws, we had a wonderful time reminiscing about my father-in-law's work and my husband's childhood. One memorable comment from my mother-in-law was, "I really wanted a daughter. I thought it would be fun to go out and share clothes with her, but instead, I gave birth to Big Joe." She then added, "So Cindy, if you don't mind, let's go out together next time." I was thrilled. However, my husband didn't seem to find this amusing. Although my mother-in-law was only joking and hadn't implied he was unwanted, he sulked. Before we got married, I found his pouting cute, but it has become a bit annoying with how frequently it happens. Perhaps because his parents were present, my husband refrained from saying anything, but he often used the threat of divorce to manipulate me into compliance. Despite the tension, we managed to navigate the situation and returned home. The following day, after returning from work, my husband entered the living room and announced, "The luxury car you bought will be a gift for my dad. If you disagree, we might as well divorce, right?" Initially, I thought he was joking and tried to brush it off, but it became evident he was dead serious. "Wait, why are you bringing this up now?" I asked, puzzled. Dad was eyeing that car with envy. The best way to honor my parents' retirement is by gifting him that car and letting him enjoy it, he insisted firmly. I was taken aback by his sudden demand, but Joe remained adamant and refused to compromise. He's always been stubborn, and there are moments when he becomes irate if I don't go along with his wishes. Annoyed, I attempted to reason with him, saying, "We agreed to spend time with your father together, didn't we? Giving the car as a gift is..." But he wasn't open to discussion. The argument escalated, and Joe began to lose his temper. As their only son, I feel it's my duty to give something back to Mom and Dad. I want them to appreciate having a son, not a daughter. Joe seemed still affected by his mother's comment about wishing for a daughter. Perhaps he felt competitive after his mother expressed interest in going out with me. I was stunned. We couldn't possibly afford to give such an expensive gift. Why don't we plan a trip to a hot spring resort instead? We talked about this yesterday, didn't we? But Joe remained dissatisfied, glaring at me. "I married you, a woman past her prime, didn't I? You have nothing to boast about. Do you even realize who is responsible for the life we're leading? Just once, listen to what I have to say." His harsh words chilled my feelings for Joe instantly. Past her prime, huh? I was aware of it, but hearing someone else say it was infuriating. After all, I managed the household chores, which put me in a better position than Joe, who couldn't do much around the house. Besides, I was also contributing financially, and our livelihood didn't depend solely on Joe's salary. With these thoughts, the aspects of Joe that grated on me began to surface. His treatment of waitstaff, his tendency to sulk, his stubbornness. I had tried to overlook these traits, but now they were starting to wear on me. As these thoughts churned in my mind, Joe left the room and returned with something in his hand. "Ha!" I exclaimed when he handed me divorce papers. As I looked up in surprise, he said, "Just sign the car ownership transfer document. If you're not okay with it, you can fill out the divorce papers and leave. It's up to you." To my disbelief, the divorce papers were already filled out. "That's enough," I muttered, feeling fed up. "Fine." As I signed the document, Joe nodded with satisfaction, casually discarding the divorce papers and retreating to his room. The next day, Joe handed me the necessary documents for the car's title transfer, asking, "Can we transfer the title even though we just took out a loan?" I took the documents, pondering his question. To be certain, I decided to consult the dealership where we purchased the car. It turned out that transferring the title while a loan was still active posed significant challenges. Additionally, since the ownership change required my father-in-law's approval, it couldn't be the surprise gift Joe envisioned. Besides, my father-in-law had never expressed a desire for a car. I thought if I explained this to Joe, he might abandon the idea. I also explored the option of selling the car. Now that it felt tainted by our recent conflict, I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep driving it. The model was popular, and production couldn't keep up with demand, so selling it could fetch a high price. With that money, I could pay off the loan and choose a new car that I truly liked. When I arrived home from work and explained to Joe the complications of changing the car's title due to the loan, he responded sharply, "Then we'll just have to buy another car. Dad will be thrilled for sure." "I'm sorry, but Dad never expressed a desire for a car," I countered. "Well, then it looks like we're really going to get divorced," Joe muttered before storming off to his room. I reached my breaking point. I had been willing to work through things if he apologized, but I couldn't continue the marriage under these circumstances. I made the decision to pack my belongings. Simultaneously, I arranged to sell the car. The dealership offering the highest price agreed to collect it at a later date. A sense of relief washed over me. I planned to move out while Joe was at work the following week, putting an end to everything. With this resolve in mind, I finished my shift on Friday and returned home, only to find the car missing from its usual spot in the parking lot. "What?" I hurried inside to check if the car keys were still where I left them. "They're gone." Panic set in as I dialed Joe's number repeatedly. Despite my efforts, he didn't answer, nor did he read my messages asking him to contact me. Did Joe take the car somewhere? But that car is already 3 hours later. I finally received a message from him. He explained he was on a trip with a colleague and suggested we both needed time to cool down. What? I exclaimed involuntarily, my voice rising as I stared at my phone screen in frustration. If Joe was on a trip, it meant he wouldn't be back tonight. I wasted no time and swiftly set my plans into motion, plans I had carefully laid out over the past few days. I called a real estate agent I knew from work and finalized the lease on the apartment he had reserved for me. I also arranged for a moving company to relocate all my belongings, furniture, appliances, everything. By the next morning, the movers had efficiently packed and transported everything to my new place. By mid-afternoon, I had settled into my new life. With the weight lifted off my shoulders, I found myself dozing off. Suddenly, my phone rang, startling me awake. It was Joe calling. He must have returned home, discovered my absence, and was likely taken aback enough to call. I couldn't help but smirk a little as I answered the phone. "Cindy, can you help me?" Joe's voice came through the phone, frantic and alarmed. It was clear he wasn't at home. "I had an accident, and my insurance isn't covering it." Confused, I replied, "What?" Joe's frustration grew evident. "That's why the new car's insurance. I called them after the accident, but they're saying it's not covered." As I pieced together his words, realization dawned. "What do you mean you had an accident? Where are you? Are you hurt?" I asked, attempting to sound concerned despite my mixed emotions. It wasn't my fault. The other party wasn't paying attention. But more importantly, what about the insurance? Joe sighed heavily. "I thought I made myself clear, didn't I? I told you not to use the car for now, Joe. You said you understood it, right? So why did you take it out without asking? We agreed to let each other know when using the car separately. Does none of that matter now?" Cindy took over, calling the insurance company from my end. Hearing the word accident made me nervous, but if he had the energy to shout, it probably wasn't too serious. I calmly laid out the situation. The car was reported stolen. When I got home, it was gone, so I reported it to the police. In fact, it was scheduled to be sold today, and now you're telling me there's been an accident. What am I supposed to do? I canceled the insurance because the sale was finalized. I canceled it when I told you not to touch the car. Upon hearing this, my husband, or rather, my soon-to-be ex-husband, began to panic. "Whoa, wait a minute. Even if I was driving our car, it shouldn't be reported stolen, Cindy. Please withdraw the theft report first. I understand about the insurance. We can discuss the financials when I get back home." But I couldn't simply accept his words. "By the way, I almost forgot to mention, you and I are now strangers. I filed for divorce 3 days ago, and it's been approved. Also, I'm not living in that house anymore." He shouted these words over the phone, but I hung up anyway. After hanging up, his calls continued relentlessly, so I eventually turned off my phone to get some peace. The next day, I took a day off from work to organize my room. When I switched my phone back on in the morning, it was flooded with missed calls from my ex-husband. There was even a call around 1 a.m., likely when he returned home. But he was the one who hastily filed for divorce, and he was the one who used divorce as a threat. If he believed that mentioning divorce would make me comply with his demands, he was mistaken. Initially, when we first married, I might have given in to avoid the embarrassment of divorce so soon after tying the knot at 35. Perhaps that's why he assumed I would comply again. However, as I sorted through my room and reflected on everything, all those pent-up frustrations finally pushed me past my hesitations. My phone rang again. Assuming it was my ex-husband, I checked, only to see it was a call from my mother-in-law. "I received a call from Joe yesterday. He mentioned something about an accident and you leaving, but I couldn't make sense of it." "What's going on?" she asked, concerned. I took a deep breath and explained everything to her. "I apologize to you and father-in-law, but the divorce is final. Regarding the money for the car and dividing our belongings, I'm planning to arrange a meeting to discuss it soon." Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law apologized profusely and said, "If it's all right with you, could I attend that meeting?" I'm worried Joe might say something unreasonable. I agreed to hold the post-divorce meeting at my in-laws' house. When I visited my in-laws after a long while, I found my father-in-law scolding my ex-husband. My mother-in-law noticed my arrival and invited me into the living room. As expected, my ex-husband was sulking, but a stern word from his father made him reluctantly lower his head. She mentioned that because you only do what you want, her life is in shambles. My father-in-law chastised him. That's when I revealed that I had sought legal advice regarding his constant threats of divorce, which could be deemed emotional abuse. My ex-husband's face drained of color upon hearing this. After some negotiation, we reached an agreement. He would cover the initial costs of the new car and the expenses related to retracting the theft report, with my father-in-law making up the difference. As I was leaving, my mother-in-law expressed regret, saying, "It's a shame we couldn't spend more time together, Cindy." I replied, "If it's all right with you, let's do it again sometime," and took my leave. It turned out that the colleagues my husband had shown off the car to on that fateful day were also present during the accident. They learned everything. The car was registered in my name, we were divorced, and the car had been reported stolen. Gossip spread through his workplace, and he became the subject of ridicule behind his back. Around this time, there was talk of a transfer, which he eagerly accepted due to discomfort in his current role. However, it turned out to be more of a demotion, sending him to a rural area. Expecting convenience stores and laundromats for daily needs, he found nothing nearby. The nearest supermarket was a 30-minute drive away, and there were no laundromats in sight. Recently, Catherine, who had invited me for a meal, expressed hesitancy about asking him how he was managing household chores. She was pleasantly surprised when I agreed to meet her, and now we've developed a close friendship. I'm content now. I've purchased a new car within my budget and enjoy solo trips, just like I did before.
They didn't knock. They never did. My ex-husband and his mother stormed into my parents' house like they still owned me. I was in the kitchen trying to get a handle on dinner while my teenage daughter Emma studied in the dining room. The sudden intrusion made my blood boil. "What are you both doing here?" I demanded, putting down a bowl and stepping into the hallway. Mike smirked, his eyes cold. He hadn't changed. "We have unfinished business, Lisa. It's about the past. About money." I could see Emma peeking out from behind the doorframe, concern etched on her face. She knew enough to stay hidden but close. Carol, Mike's mother, crossed her arms. "This is about what's rightfully ours, Lisa." "Rightfully yours?" I shot back. "You have no right to barge in here." Mike stepped closer, his voice low. "You owe us, Lisa. Owe you. For what?" I spat. The nerve of them. Emma stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Mom, do you need me to call Grandpa?" "No, sweetie," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Turning back to Mike, I added, "You need to leave. Now. We have nothing to discuss." Carol's eyes narrowed. "You think you can just walk away from everything without consequences? Think again," I scoffed. "The only consequences are the ones you've brought on yourselves." Mike took another step forward, close enough that I could smell his cologne. "If you won't talk to us willingly, we can take this to court. You can't hide forever, Lisa." I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. "You're not welcome here. Get out before I call the police." Carol sneered. "You're making a mistake, dear." Mike looked at Emma. "This affects you too, Emma. Think about your future." Emma stepped beside me, taking my hand. "My future doesn't include you," she said, her voice stronger than I felt at that moment. Mike's face hardened. "Fine. We'll be back. You can't run from this forever, Lisa." I watched them leave, slamming the door behind them. Emma hugged me, and I felt my resolve solidify. This wasn't over, but I wouldn't let them bully us anymore. "Mom, what did they mean about money?" Emma asked, her eyes brimming with worry. I sighed, leading her back to the dining room. "It's complicated, honey. They're trying to stir up trouble because they're bitter about the divorce, but we'll deal with it, together." Emma sat down, her face a mixture of concern and determination. "You don't have to face them alone, Mom." Her words gave me strength. "I know, sweetie, and I won't. We'll handle whatever they throw at us. We're stronger than they think." We continued with dinner, the tension lingering like a bad taste in the air. But in that moment, within the walls of my parents' house, we were safe. I knew we had a battle ahead, but I also knew we had each other, and that was enough to face whatever came next. The intrusion had stirred up a storm of emotions, and as I cleared the table, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Mike and Carol were out for blood, and I had to be ready for whatever they planned next. But they underestimated the strength that comes from protecting your own. They underestimated me. The house was quiet after the door slammed shut, but a storm brewed inside me. I watched Emma pick at her food, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. "Emma, are you okay?" I asked, settling down across from her. She looked up, gnawing at her lip. "I need to tell you something, Mom. Something about Dad." My stomach tightened. What's going on, honey? Emma hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. Before you and Dad divorced, I saw him with another woman. The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? When did this happen? Her eyes welled up with tears. A few months before everything happened. I saw them together at a cafe. They were holding hands. The room felt like it was closing in on me. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I was scared, Mom. I didn't want to make things worse. I hoped it was just nothing, she whispered, biting her lip. I reached across the table, squeezing her trembling hand. It's not your fault, Emma. None of this is. Thank you for telling me now. She nodded, relief washing over her face. What are we going to do, Mom? We're going to find the truth and make sure they face the consequences, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. The next few days were tense. I couldn't shake the image of Mike with another woman. I needed answers. One evening as I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, I called my friend Mandy. She was a part-time investigator, and I trusted her. Mandy, I need your help, I said as she picked up. What's going on, Lisa? Her concerned voice was a small comfort. Mike was cheating on me before the divorce. I need proof, and if he's hiding anything else, I need to know. There was a pause before she responded. I'll look into it. But be careful, Lisa. These things can get ugly. I know, but I need to do this for Emma, I replied, glancing at my daughter, who was engrossed in her homework. Emma and I had more conversations over the following week. She remembered small details about the woman she'd seen with Mike, an old friend of mine, Rachel. The betrayal stung deeper, knowing someone I once trusted was involved. One afternoon, I confronted Emma in the living room. Emma, what else do you remember about that woman with your dad? Emma looked up from her book, her eyebrows knit together. She had dark hair, kind of curly. I think it was Rachel. My heart sank. Rachel? Are you sure? Emma nodded slowly. I saw them together more than once, Mom. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, sweetie. You've helped more than you know. I struggled to keep my voice steady. Emma sighed. I wish things were different. We can't change the past, but we can shape our future, I said, wrapping an arm around her. We'll get through this. Mandy soon had news. She'd gathered enough evidence, emails, photos, even financial records, that proved Mike's affair with Rachel. The betrayal was now concrete. As I sifted through the damning evidence, my resolve hardened. This wasn't just about the affair. It was about the lies and the deceit that ripped through our lives. Mike had to face the consequences, and I would make sure he did. Emma and I were in this together, and that gave me strength. The storm was far from over, but now I had a direction, a purpose. We would expose the truth, and Mike would finally see the fallout from his actions. Over the next few days, I took Mandy's gathered evidence and pieced together the timeline of Mike's affair. The betrayal hurt, but knowing the truth fueled my determination. I needed more. So I called up an old friend who worked at a small-town investigative firm. Lisa, it's been a while, said Jerry as we sat in his cluttered office. Photos filled the walls, trophies of solved cases. He offered me a smile, though his eyes were serious. What can I do for you? I need your help, I replied, handing him the folder Mandy had compiled. My ex-husband, Mike. I need every detail you can find on him, and this woman, Rachel. Jerry flipped through the pages, his brows furrowed. You sure about this? Digging up more might be rough. I'm sure. My voice didn't waver, despite the churning in my gut. I need to know everything. I'll get on it, he said. Give me a few days. As I left his office, a sense of both dread and anticipation hung over me. I busied myself at work, trying to remain focused, but my thoughts always drifted back to the revelations. Days later, Jerry called me. We met at a quiet diner, away from prying eyes. He slid a second folder across the table. You might want to sit down for this. Inside were more than just photos and emails. There were financial statements. Mike had been siphoning money from our joint savings for years, funneling it to secret accounts that funded his double life with Rachel. My finger trembled as I sifted through the evidence. He's been meticulous, Jerry said, sipping his coffee, but not enough to cover his tracks completely. I can't believe this, I murmured. Not just the affair, but the money, our savings. Jerry nodded. He's vile. Betraying your trust like this, what do you plan to do? I closed the folder, a fierce determination rising within me. He thinks he can get away with this, but he's about to learn otherwise. Back home, I spread the new evidence across the dining table. Emma joined me, her eyes wide with curiosity and concern. "Mom, what did you find out?" "Turns out your dad was doing more than just cheating," I said, showing her the papers. "He was stealing from us too." Emma looked through the documents, her face a mix of anger and sadness. "How could he do this to us?" "I don't know, honey," I replied, hugging her, "but I promise he'll pay for it." Later that night, I called Mandy. "I've got more now, enough to confront him," she sighed. "Lisa, just be careful. This kind of confrontation can get messy." "I know, but I can't let him get away with this." The next day, I arranged a meeting with a family lawyer recommended by Jerry. We discussed the financial evidence, and he assured me we had a solid case. "He'll have no choice but to face the consequences," the lawyer said, his voice firm. "You've got him cornered." Despite knowing this, a knot of anxiety remained tight in my chest. With the evidence gathered, I now prepared myself for the next step, confronting Mike and Rachel face to face. It was time to reveal what I knew and watch their deceit unravel around them. As I sat on the edge of my bed that night, Emma's quiet presence beside me, I felt a sense of resolve wash over. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming our lives from the shadow of deceit. Together, we'd bring the truth to light, and Mike would finally face the fallout of his actions. With the evidence in hand and a plan forming in my mind, we waited. The storm was about to break, and I braced myself for the confrontation ahead. I sat at the local coffee shop, staring at the door every few seconds. Rachel was late, but I expected nothing less. She liked to make an entrance. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness matching my mood. Finally, she sauntered in, her hair perfectly styled and her makeup impeccable. She spotted me and rushed over with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lisa, long time no see, how are you?" "Doing well, Rachel. How about you?" I kept my voice neutral, gesturing to the seat across from me. She settled in, crossing her legs and leaning forward slightly. "Oh, keeping busy. Life after divorce, right?" I forced a smile. "Right. Funny how things turn out." Her eyes flickered, a brief flash of something guarded. "Yeah, funny. So, what have you been up to?" "Keeping busy myself," I said, taking another sip. "Emma and I have been adjusting, moving forward. Speaking of moving forward, I heard you ran into Mike recently." Rachel's smile faltered for just a second, but she quickly recovered. "Oh yeah, small world, huh?" "Small town, more like," I replied, giving her a pointed look. "You never really know people as well as you think you do." She fumbled slightly with her cup. "What are you implying?" I leaned in, my voice low but firm. "I think you know exactly what I'm implying, Rachel." Her face paled slightly before she plastered on another smile. "Lisa, if you have something to say, just say it." "I know about the affair," I said flatly, watching her reaction closely. "I know everything." Rachel's facade cracked. She set her cup down, her hands trembling. "Lisa, it's not what you think. So, you weren't having an affair with my husband? You weren't helping him steal from me?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. She looked around nervously, her voice a whisper now. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Mike said he was leaving you anyway. He said you were done." "And the money? What about that? Was I done with our savings too?" I demanded, feeling the anger rise. "Lisa, please. Mike planned everything. I just went along with it," she stammered, her eyes pleading. "You betrayed me, Rachel." "Not just as a friend, but as a human being," I said, standing up. "And make no mistake, you'll both pay for this." She reached for me, but I stepped back. "Lisa, please, I can help. I can testify against Mike. Just give me a chance." I watched her for a moment, weighing her words. Finally, I nodded. "Fine, you want to make it right? Get me more evidence. Show me you're serious." Rachel looked relieved, nodding quickly. "I will. I promise." I walked out of the coffee shop, my heart pounding. Step 1 was done. Rachel was scared and willing to turn on Mike. I needed every piece of leverage I could get, and having her on my side, even temporarily, was one more card to play. Back home, I found Emma curled up on the couch, reading. She looked up as I came in, concern in her eyes. "How did it go, Mom?" "As expected," I said, sitting next to her. "Rachel's scared. She'll give us more evidence against Mike." Emma nodded, a small smile forming. "Good, he can't keep hurting us." "No, he can't," I agreed, hugging her tightly. "And he won't. We're going to bring him down, Emma. Together." As I held my daughter, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We had the beginnings of a plan, and the pieces were falling into place. Now we just had to see it through. And Mike, well, his time was running out. A week later, Rachel called me, her voice frantic. "Lisa, I've got more. Meet me at the park near the old oak tree." I agreed and hurried there, the autumn air chilling my resolve into something harder. Rachel was already waiting, clutching an envelope. Her hands were shaking. "Here," she said, thrusting the envelope at me. "This is everything I could find. Emails, bank statements, all of it." I opened the envelope, my eyes scanning the documents. It was damning evidence, proof of Mike's betrayal and greed. "Why are you doing this, Rachel?" I asked, still not fully trusting her. She looked down, tears filling her eyes. "I made a mistake, Lisa. A huge mistake. I thought he loved me, but I see now that he was using me. I just want to make things right." I nodded, pocketing the envelope. "All right, but this doesn't absolve you. You still played a part." "I know," she whispered, looking broken. "But please, take him down. He deserves it." "You can count on that," I said, turning to leave. "Stay out of the way. This is between me and Mike now." Back home, I spread the new evidence across the table, my breath catching in my throat. Mandy walked in, her eyes widening at the sight. "That's quite a haul." "Yeah," I said, passing her a stack of emails. "This should prove he was siphoning money for years." Mandy scanned through them, her face hardening. "Lisa, this isn't just about an affair anymore. This is fraud, plain and simple." "Exactly," I replied, organizing the papers, "and he's going to face the consequences." "Are you ready for this?" Mandy's voice was cautious but supportive. I nodded. More than ever. The following day I made copies of everything and met with our family lawyer. He inspected the evidence, nodding approvingly. "You've got a solid case, Lisa. Mike won't be able to squirm out of this." "Good," I said, leaning back in my chair, "because I want him to face every bit of it." Our plan was simple but effective. Use the evidence to confront Mike and Rachel publicly, ensuring they couldn't deny or hide from their actions. Later, as I sat in my office at work, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Emma. "Mom, what's the next step?" I replied quickly, "We confront them at the community fundraiser this weekend. Be ready." My heart raced as the night of the fundraiser approached. Emma and I walked through the crowded event, my mind focused on the plan. Mike and Rachel were there, chatting with guests, oblivious to the storm heading their way. I approached them, my voice loud enough to catch everyone's attention. "Enjoying your evening? Because it's about to get a lot more interesting." Mike's face turned ashen, pure rage flickering in his eyes. "Lisa, what are you doing?" "Exposing the truth," I replied, holding out the envelope. "We all deserve to know what you've been up to." A murmur spread through the crowd as I detailed Mike's theft and infidelity. Faces turned from curious to disgusted, and whispers grew louder. Rachel looked ready to flee, guilt written all over her face. "Lisa, please, don't do this." "It's too late for that," I said, my voice unwavering. "You both betrayed and stole from me. Now everyone knows." A crowd member called out, "Isn't that Mike? What's going on?" Mike's facade crumbled and he snarled, "You've ruined me, Lisa." I met his glare with steel. "No, Mike, you ruined yourself." It felt like a weight had lifted as I walked away, Emma beside me. The truth was out, and the fallout had begun. Mike and Rachel had nowhere to hide now. Emma hugged me tightly once we were outside. "We're going to be okay, right, Mom?" I kissed her forehead, feeling the strength in her embrace. "Yes, sweetie, we are. Together, we're going to be just fine." As we headed home, the night sky clear above us, I knew one thing for sure. The future was ours to rebuild, one step at a time. The truth was burning inside me, ready to explode. It was time to face them. I stood in the thick of the crowd at the community fundraiser, feeling the weight of the confrontation ahead. Emma was at my side, her hand squeezing mine in silent support. I caught sight of Mike, flanked by a few colleagues, his charm on full display. Rachel hovered nearby, eyeing me with a mix of fear and defiance. It was now or never. I cleared my throat and stepped forward, raising my voice enough for everyone to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption, but I have something important to share." Heads turned in my direction, and the room fell silent. Mike's eyes narrowed, his smile faltering. "Lisa, what are you doing?" "Enough lies, Mike," I said, holding up the stack of evidence. "It's time everyone knows the truth about you and Rachel." A murmur spread through the crowd as I began laying out the details, the affair, the theft, the betrayal. Faces turned from curious to shocked to disgusted. Rachel looked like a deer in headlights, frozen as I revealed their sordid secrets one by one. Mike's been siphoning money from our joint account for years, I said, my voice unwavering. He's been using it to fund his affair with Rachel. Enjoying your evening because it's about to get a lot more interesting, I added, turning to face the two of them fully. The anger in Mike's eyes was unmistakable. Lisa, shut up! But I was far from finished. You betrayed me, lied to me, and stole from our family, I continued, addressing the crowd more than Mike, and it's time to face the consequences. A ripple of gasps and whispers swept through the room. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Isn't that Mike? What's going on?" Mike lunged forward, trying to snatch the papers from my hands. You've ruined me, Lisa. I stepped back, holding the evidence high. No, Mike, you ruined yourself. Rachel finally found her voice, her tone desperate. I tried to stop him, Lisa. You have to believe me. Believe you? I laughed bitterly. You're just as guilty. You knew exactly what you were doing. The air was thick with tension as the fundraiser organizers pulled me aside, trying to defuse the situation. But the damage was done. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. As Mike and Rachel stood there, exposed and humiliated, the crowd began to turn against them. Colleagues avoided their gaze, friends whispered behind cupped hands, and some even walked away in disgust. My lawyer, who had been conveniently present, stepped forward, taking the stack of evidence from me. We'll be in touch, Mike. I suggest you prepare yourself. Mike glared at me one last time before storming out, Rachel trailing after him. The room gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy, though the tension lingered like a bad odor. Emma hugged me tightly, her eyes shining with pride. We did it, Mom. We really did it. I kissed the top of her head, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. Yes, we did. And now we can start to move on. We left the event, the cold night air feeling like a fresh start. As we walked hand in hand, I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be ours to walk, free from the shadows of deceit. Back at the house, as Emma drifted off to sleep, I sat by the window, looking out into the darkness. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. The truth was out, and the healing could finally begin. Together, Emma and I would rebuild our lives, one step at a time. The fallout began almost immediately. Mike's phone calls went unanswered as colleagues, friends, and even family members turned their backs. His once flawless reputation lay in ruins. At work, the whispers grew louder until they reached the ears of his superiors. I received a call from an old friend who worked in Mike's company, the tone hushed and serious. Lisa, you won't believe it. They're launching an internal investigation into Mike's finances. He might lose his job. Good, I replied coldly. He deserves everything that's coming to him. Meanwhile, Rachel's world was unraveling too. Her husband, blindsided by the affair and fraud, filed for divorce immediately. She showed up at my doorstep one evening, eyes red and swollen. She clutched a piece of paper in her hand. Lisa, please, she pleaded, her voice breaking. I need to talk to you. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. What do you want, Rachel? She took a deep breath, shoving the paper toward me. It's the divorce papers. I don't know what to do. That's not my problem, Rachel. You made your bed, I said firmly, my sympathy buried under layers of betrayal. Please, I didn't know it would end like this, she cried, her tears falling freely. I lost everything. You didn't think about that when you were stealing from me, did you? I snapped. You should leave. My life is falling apart, Lisa, she screamed, desperation etched on her face. I'm losing everything. And you think I should care? You brought this on yourself, I replied, shutting the door on her pleading eyes. The next few days brought more chaos for Mike. He was suspended pending the investigation, and the bank froze his accounts. Every time he tried to reach out to me, I ignored his calls. Emma and I were determined to move forward. Mom, you look tired. Are you okay? Emma asked one evening as we sat on the couch, the TV playing softly in the background. I'm fine, sweetie, I said, squeezing her hand. Just thinking about how everything is changing. Emma's face grew serious. Do we have to see Dad again? I shook my head. Not if we don't want to. We have the power to decide what's best for us. She nodded, her expression softer. Good. I don't want to see him. I understand, I replied, pulling her into a hug. We're going to be all right, Emma. The next afternoon, as I was organizing the documents to finalize the legal battles, Mike showed up at my office. He looked disheveled and desperate. "Lisa, we need to talk," he said, barging in past my protests. "What do you want, Mike?" I said, my patience wearing thin. "You've ruined me, Lisa. Everything's falling apart," he hissed, eyes filled with a mixture of anger and fear. "No, Mike, you ruined yourself," I shot back. "You lied, cheated, and stole. Did you expect no consequences?" He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "I lost my job. The investigation's tearing me apart. Please, help me fix this." I stared at him, incredulous. "Help you? You're unbelievable. After everything you've done, you expect me to help you?" "Please, Lisa. For Emma's sake," he begged, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. "Don't bring her into this. She's suffered enough because of you," I said coldly. "Get out of my office, Mike. Face your consequences as like an adult." His shoulders sagged as he walked out, the reality of his actions weighing him down. I watched him leave, my heart steady, knowing I had made the right choice. As the days turned into weeks, the repercussions of Mike's actions unraveled further. Rachel moved out of town, trying to escape the scandal. Mike's life continued to crumble, each new day stripping away a piece of his former self. Through it all, Emma and I found our footing in our new normal, taking it day by day. We weren't just surviving, we were starting to thrive. And that was the best revenge of all. The sun shone brightly as Emma and I unpacked the last of the boxes in our new home. It was a modest house in a quieter part of town, but it felt like a fresh start. "Mom, where should I put these books?" Emma asked, holding up a stack. "Let's set up a small bookshelf in the living room," I suggested, smiling at her enthusiasm. We worked together, arranging our things with care. Each item found its place, and with each box emptied, the house started to feel more like home. In the early evening, as we relaxed on the couch, Emma turned to me. "Do you think Dad will ever get his life together?" I sighed, thinking of the wreckage Mike had made of his own life. "I don't know, Emma. That's up to him now. But we don't have to worry about that anymore." She nodded, her face serene. "I'm glad we're here, Mom. It feels right." "Me too, sweetie," I said, hugging her close. "We're starting a new chapter." To celebrate our new beginning, we decided to have a small dinner party. I invited Mandy and a few close friends. They came with warm smiles and housewarming gifts, their presence filling the house with laughter and joy. Mandy pulled me aside later in the evening, her eyes twinkling. "You've come a long way, Lisa. I'm proud of you." "Thanks, Mandy," I said, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. "I couldn't have done it without you." As the night wound down and our guests left, Emma and I sat on the porch, gazing at the stars. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "We're going to be okay, right, Mom?" "Yes, we are, sweetie," together, I assured her, kissing her forehead. The days turned into weeks, and we settled into our new routine. Emma thrived in her new school, with Swap making friends and engaging in activities she enjoyed. I found solace in my work and the rhythm of our new life. One afternoon, I received a letter from Mike. He had lost everything, his job, his home, and most of his friends. But the tone of the letter was different. It wasn't angry or blaming. It was reflective, almost remorseful. "Lisa, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I realize the depth of my mistakes. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you and Emma. I hope you both find the happiness you deserve." I read the letter twice, feeling a mix of emotions. I decided not to respond. Mike's journey was his own now, and I needed to focus on ours. "Morn, everything okay?" Emma asked, noticing my thoughtful expression. "Yeah," I said, smiling, "just thinking about how far we've come." "Me too," she said, her eyes bright. "I can't wait to see what's next." Life continued, filled with small, meaningful moments that stitched our days together. Emma and I grew stronger, not just as individuals, but as a family unit. We learned to cherish the quiet joy of everyday life, free from the shadow of deceit and betrayal. One Saturday morning, Emma and I decided to plant a garden in the backyard. As we dug into the soil, planting seeds for the future, we laughed and talked about our dreams. "One day this garden will be full of flowers," Emma said, her eyes shining with hope. "Yes, it will," I agreed, feeling the richness of the soil in my hands, just like our lives. As the sun set, casting a golden hue over our new home, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The journey had been hard, filled with pain and betrayal, but we had come out stronger. The future stretched before us, a path we would walk together step by step, one day at a time. and for the first time in a long while, I knew we would be all right. The funeral was a small, somber affair. Just a handful of us gathered to say goodbye to my father, Ted Walton. As I stood there, numb with grief, my mother-in-law, Denise, leaned in close. "Gina, life doesn't wait. You have to start thinking about us now," she said coldly. I fought back tears, my heart aching. Am I not allowed to grieve my father quietly? He was the one person who truly understood me, and now he was gone. After the service, the lawyer approached. "Mrs. Davis, your father left you his house in Brooklyn Heights. It's a quaint but valuable property." My husband Mike's eyes lit up. "Wow, that's incredible. We could renovate it, make it perfect for my parents and us to live together." I felt a knot forming in my stomach. "But I need time. This is all so sudden." Mike squeezed my arm. "Of course, dear. We'll discuss it later." As we drove home, Mike couldn't contain his excitement. Just imagine it. A big, beautiful home for all of us. No more dealing with landlords or mortgages. I stared out the window, my mind swirling. Dad's house was my last connection to him. How could I let it go so easily? In the following weeks, the pressure only intensified. Denise and Frank, my father-in-law, seemed to take every opportunity to criticize me. "Gina, Mike needs more than just chicken thighs. You must do better for him," Denise snapped one night as I served dinner. Frank eyed the meal dismissively. "A cheap steak? After his hard day at work, Mike deserves a proper meal." I bit my tongue, feeling their disapproval like a weight on my shoulders. Mike just shrugged, siding with his parents as usual. Then one afternoon, I came home to a jarring sight: construction vehicles outside Dad's house. A contractor approached me confused. "Mrs. Davis, your husband approved these renovations. We're just following orders." My heart dropped. Renovations? I never agreed to any of this. I stormed inside, confronting Mike. He tried to play it off casually. "It's for the best, Gina. We're making this place our dream home." Tears stung my eyes. "Our dream home? This was my father's house, Mike. How could you do this without even consulting me?" His face hardened. "If you can't accept my parents living with us, then we're through. It's that simple." I felt like the ground was crumbling beneath me. After everything Dad had given me, was I really going to let his memory be tarnished like this? Clenching my fists, I met Mike's gaze. "I won't be manipulated anymore. This house is about my father's legacy, and I'm going to protect it, with or without you." As I walked out that day, I knew my life would never be the same. But in that moment, all I could feel was a fierce determination to honor the man who had given me so much strength. After walking out on Mike that day, I felt adrift. My marriage was crumbling, and I had nowhere to go. Thankfully, an old friend of my father's, Paul Hendricks, offered me a lifeline. "Gina, you're welcome to stay with me until you get back on your feet," Paul said warmly, ushering me into his modest apartment. As I settled in, Paul's calming presence reminded me so much of Dad. He had been Dad's confidant for years, and now I desperately needed that wisdom. "Paul, what am I going to do?" I asked, feeling the weight of my situation. "Mike has turned Dad's house into a battleground." Paul placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "That house is yours, Gina. No one can take that away from you. We'll figure this out together." Over the next few days, Paul and I pored over documents and legal papers, formulating a plan. My determination grew as the path ahead became clearer. "Your father wanted that house to be a sanctuary, a place of peace," Paul reminded me. "We'll make sure it serves that purpose in his memory." Finally, I was ready to confront Mike and his parents. Paul had secured a meeting at the house, saying it was time for an open discussion about its future. The tension was palpable as Denise, Frank, and Mike arrived. Mike shot me a resentful glare, but I stood my ground, Paul by my side. "You had no right to make those decisions about my inheritance," I stated firmly. "This house is part of my father's legacy, and I have a plan to honor that." Denise's face contorted in rage. "You ungrateful, selfish girl, after everything we've done for you?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "What you've done is try to take control, with no regard for Dad's wishes. Well, it ends now." To my surprise, Mike spoke up, his voice dripping with disdain. "So you're just going to throw us out? Your own family?" "If that's what it takes to protect what's rightfully mine, then yes," I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "This is the last time I'll be bullied or manipulated by any of you." Paul stepped forward. I'm afraid you've left us no choice. We have the legal documentation to take over the property immediately. I suggest you make arrangements to leave." Denise opened her mouth to protest, but Frank silenced her with a defeated shake of his head. As they turned to leave, I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me. It was over. I had won. In the weeks that followed, Paul and I worked tirelessly to bring my vision for the house to life. We renovated and refurbished, creating a warm, welcoming space that embodied Dad's generous spirit. "He would be so proud of you, Gina," Paul said as we stood in the newly revived garden. "You've turned this place into something truly special." I smiled, feeling the warm breeze on my face. I just hope I've honored his memory and shown the strength he instilled in me. As the grand opening day arrived for the new community center, I knew Dad was there in spirit, surrounding me with the serenity he had always provided. It was the first day of my new life, a life of freedom and peace, just as he would have wanted. In the weeks following my confrontation with Mike and his parents, daily life became increasingly tense. Denise and Frank seemed determined to make me miserable, criticizing my every move. "Gina, Mike needs more than just chicken thighs for dinner," Denise snapped one evening as I served our modest meal. "You must do better for him." I bit my tongue, refusing to engage. But Frank piled on with a dismissive glance at the food. "A cheap steak? After his hard day at work, Mike deserves a proper meal." Mike remained silent as usual, siding with his parents through his passivity. I felt utterly alone, isolated in my own home. The constant barrage of demands and insults wore me down. No matter how hard I tried, it was never enough for Denise and Frank. They seemed hell-bent on dominating every aspect of our lives. One evening, as I cleared the dinner plates, Denise fixed me with a cold stare. "You know, Gina, we're not getting any younger. We'll need to start discussing living arrangements soon." My heart sank. I knew exactly what she was implying, moving into my father's house in Brooklyn Heights. I need more time," I stammered, feeling trapped. "That house means so much to me. It was Dad's." Frank scoffed. "Ted's gone now. It's time to start thinking practically about our future as a family." Mike finally spoke up, his voice laced with irritation. "They're right, Gina. We can't keep putting this off. My parents need a permanent place to live, and that house is the perfect solution." I wanted to scream. How could he be so callous about my father's memory? But I knew any protest would be met with more criticism, more demands. In the following days, the tension only escalated. Denise and Frank seemed to take every opportunity to remind me of my supposed failings as a wife and daughter-in-law. "Did you even dust today, Gina?" Denise would sneer, running a finger along a surface. "This place is a pigsty." Frank would chime in with his own jabs. "No wonder Mike comes home so stressed. This environment is unbearable." Through it all, Mike remained infuriatingly passive, letting his parents dictate the narrative of our lives. I felt like I was slowly suffocating, drowning in their constant belittlement. Finally, one fateful afternoon, I returned home to a shocking sight: construction vehicles outside my father's house. A contractor approached me, confused. "Mrs. Davis, your husband approved these renovations. We're just following orders." My heart dropped to my stomach. "Renovations? I never agreed to any of this." I stormed inside, confronting Mike. He tried to play it off casually, but I could see the smug satisfaction in his eyes. "It's for the best, Gina. We're making this place our dream home, just like we discussed." Tears stung my eyes as I realized the profound breach of trust. "Our dream home? This was my father's house, Mike. How could you do this without even consulting me?" His face hardened, and I saw a glimpse of the true man he had become. Selfish, entitled, devoid of empathy. "If you can't accept my parents living with us, then we're through," he stated coldly. "It's that simple." In that moment, everything became crystal clear. My marriage was a sham, my autonomy stripped away piece by piece. But I wouldn't be a victim anymore. Clenching my fists, I met Mike's gaze with a newfound strength. "I won't be manipulated anymore. This house is about my father's legacy, and I'm going to protect it, with or without you." As I walked out that day, I knew there was no turning back. But for the first time in years, I felt free, ready to reclaim the life my father had wanted for me. After I stormed out of my father's home in a fit of anger, I found myself wandering aimlessly through the city streets. The crisp night air provided little solace as I grappled with the profound betrayal I had endured. Mike's callous disregard for my feelings had cut me deeply. Eventually, I made my way to Paul's apartment, the one place I felt I could find refuge. As I stepped inside, a wave of calm washed over me, a momentary escape from the turmoil raging within. I sank into the familiar comfort of his worn armchair, allowing the anger and hurt to slowly subside. In that moment of quiet, I found myself haunted by the sickening realization that my husband had so brazenly violated my trust. How could he have authorized such drastic changes to Dad's cherished home without my consent? The sting of that betrayal burned fiercely, fueling my indignation. As the hours ticked by, I pictured Mike's smug satisfaction as he oversaw the destruction of that sacred space, the desecration of Dad's memory. My fury mounted as I imagined his callous disregard for my feelings, his selfish disrespect for all that Dad had left me. The man had no shame, no regard for the sanctity of that connection to my father. In that moment, I resolved to sever that final tie to him, to cut that last cord binding me to his contempt. I would not allow his arrogance to further defile Dad's legacy, to strip me of that precious link to the man who had given me so much. I would reclaim my dignity, my self-respect, by severing that final thread. With a renewed sense of purpose, I rose from the chair, determined to preserve that last remnant of my father's spirit. I would not permit Mike's callous disregard to taint that final bond, that last connection to the man who had nurtured me, who had shaped my character. I would not allow his scorn to further diminish my sense of self. With a steadying breath, I made my way to the small alcove where I kept my few cherished possessions from Dad. There, nestled in a worn leather case, was the small token of his affection, the simple memento of his love, the antique fountain pen he had given me on my 16th birthday. I grasped the smooth, polished surface, feeling the familiar curve of the nib against my fingertips, and began to chronicle my resolve, my determination to preserve that final connection to the man who had meant so much. In the days following my confrontation with Mike, I found myself adrift, untethered from the life I had once known. The decision to leave my husband had been agonizing, but I knew in my heart it was the only path forward. I could no longer subject myself to his manipulation, his blatant disregard for my autonomy. As I settled into the modest apartment Paul had offered me, I felt a strange sense of calm amidst the turmoil. This space, though unfamiliar, represented a clean slate, a chance to rebuild my life on my own terms, free from the toxic influence of Mike and his overbearing parents. Yet, even as I sought to move forward, the sting of Mike's betrayal lingered. The image of my father's house, that sacred space now defiled by his selfish renovations, haunted me. How could he have so callously disregarded my wishes, my connection to Dad's memory? In those quiet moments alone, I found myself wrestling with a burning sense of injustice. Mike had not only violated my trust, but had trampled upon the very essence of what Dad had left me, a sanctuary, a place of serenity and refuge. His actions had desecrated that final link to the man who had shaped me, who had instilled in me the values of integrity and respect. As the days turned to weeks, that simmering indignation began to crystallize into a fierce determination. I would not allow Mike's selfish ambitions to rob me of my father's legacy. That house, that cherished space, belonged to me, and I would reclaim it no matter the cost. It was during one of my frequent visits with Paul that the pieces began to fall into place. As we pored over the legal documents surrounding the inheritance, he placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "Gina, this house is yours, and yours alone. No one, not even Mike, can take that away from you." His words resonated deeply, reigniting the spark of defiance that had been smoldering within me. I met his gaze, my jaw set with newfound resolve. "You're right, Paul. It's time to protect what my father entrusted to me, to honor his memory in the way he would have wanted." From that moment on, a plan began to take shape. With Paul's guidance and unwavering support, I would navigate the legal intricacies, building an ironclad case to wrest control of the house from Mike's grasp. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, confrontations that would test the very limits of my resilience. But I was ready, fortified by the knowledge that I was fighting for something greater than myself, a sacred bond with the man who had given me life, the man whose values had shaped the core of my being. As I looked ahead to the impending battle, a sense of clarity washed over me. This was about more than just a house. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my self-worth. I would emerge from this crucible stronger, tempered by the fire of my convictions. And when the dust finally settled, I vowed that house would stand as a testament to my father's legacy, a beacon of resilience and unwavering love, shining through the darkness that had once threatened to consume me. In the weeks following my decision to leave Mike, I found solace in the company of an unexpected ally, Paul Hendricks, one of my father's oldest friends. As I settled into the modest apartment he had offered me, Paul's calming presence reminded me so much of Dad. "You know, Gina, your father spoke of you often," Paul said one evening as we sipped tea in his cozy living room. "He was immensely proud of the woman you've become." I felt a lump form in my throat at the mention of Dad. "I just wish he could see me now, Paul. I feel so lost without his guidance." Paul reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand on mine. "Ted may be gone, but his spirit lives on in you. And that house he left you? It's a part of his legacy, his final gift." My thoughts turned to the Brooklyn Heights home, now tainted by Mike's selfish renovations. A pang of sadness washed over me, quickly replaced by a simmering anger. "That's just it, Paul. Mike has desecrated everything Dad stood for with that place. He's turned it into a battlefield, all for his own gain." Paul's eyes narrowed, a determined glint flickering behind his glasses. "Then we'll take it back, Gina. That house belongs to you, and no one can take that away." In the days that followed, Paul and I pored over legal documents, meticulously building a case to reclaim my inheritance. With each strategy session, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a fire igniting within me. "Your father trusted you with that home for a reason," Paul reminded me. "It's time to protect what he entrusted to you, to honor his memory in the way he would have wanted." Those words resonated deep within me, echoing the same resilience and strength that Dad had instilled from an early age. I was my father's daughter, imbued with his unwavering spirit. As our plan took shape, I found myself channeling that inner fortitude, drawing strength from the memories of Dad's unwavering love and support. This was about more than just a house. It was a battle to preserve his legacy, to ensure that the values he had imparted would endure. Finally, the day arrived for our first legal maneuver, a formal letter demanding that Mike and his parents vacate the premises immediately. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as Paul and I made our way to the house, each step fueled by a sense of righteous determination. When Mike answered the door, his expression quickly shifted from confusion to outright contempt. "Gina? What is this nonsense?" I steeled myself, meeting his gaze with an unwavering resolve. "This nonsense is me taking back what's rightfully mine. You had no right to make those decisions about my inheritance, Mike. This house is a part of my father's legacy, and I won't let you defile it any longer." As the words left my lips, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The shackles of Mike's manipulation, of his parents' toxic influence, began to loosen their grip. Mike's face contorted in anger, but before he could respond, Paul stepped forward, brandishing the legal documents like a sword. "I suggest you heed this notice, Michael. We have taken all necessary steps to ensure Gina's rightful claim to this property. Any further resistance will only compound the consequences you face." In that moment, I knew there was no turning back. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was prepared to fight with every ounce of my being. This was about more than just a house. It was about reclaiming my autonomy, my self-worth. And with Paul's steadfast support, I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, emboldened by the knowledge that I was honoring my father's most sacred gift. With Paul's steadfast support and guidance, the wheels were set in motion to reclaim what was rightfully mine, my father's cherished home in Brooklyn Heights. Yet, even as our legal strategy took shape, I knew the true battle would be far more personal, a confrontation I had been both dreading and anticipating. It was Paul who suggested we arrange a family dinner at the house, a final opportunity to resolve the matter civilly before escalating our efforts. Though apprehensive, I agreed, recognizing that this might be my last chance to appeal to whatever shred of decency still resided within Mike and his parents. The tension was palpable the moment they arrived, their expressions a mix of confusion and thinly veiled contempt. Denise, ever the antagonist, wasted no time in voicing her displeasure. Just what is the meaning of this, Gina? She sneered, her eyes narrowing. We don't have time for your games. I took a deep breath, steadying myself as Paul gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. This is no game, Denise, I stated firmly. You all had no right to make those decisions about my inheritance. This house is a part of my father's legacy, and I have a plan to honor that in a way he would have wanted. Mike scoffed, his disdain evident. Your plan? Don't be ridiculous, Gina. This is our future we're talking about. No, Mike, I countered, my voice unwavering. This is about preserving what my father entrusted to me, what he wanted to leave behind for generations to come. Denise's face contorted in rage, and for a moment I thought she might explode. You ungrateful, selfish girl, after everything we've done for you? I felt Paul tense beside me, but I remained resolute, drawing strength from the memory of my father's unwavering spirit. What you've done is try to take control, with no regard for Dad's wishes, I stated, meeting Denise's fiery gaze. Well, it ends now. This house will become what it was always meant to be, a sanctuary, a place of peace and community, just as Dad envisioned. Frank, ever the passive observer, opened his mouth to protest, but I raised my hand, silencing him. I've already taken the necessary legal steps to assume full ownership of this property. Any further resistance on your part will only lead to consequences none of us want. Mike's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched in barely contained fury. So, you're just going to throw us out? Your own family? I matched his stare, unflinching. If that's what it takes to protect what's rightfully mine, then yes, this is the last time I'll be bullied or manipulated by any of you. An uneasy silence fell over the room, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Finally, it was Denise who broke the tension, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. How dare you? After everything we've sacrificed for this family? Paul stepped forward, his presence commanding respect. I'm afraid you've left us no choice. We have the legal documentation to take over the property immediately. I suggest you make arrangements to leave. For a moment, it seemed as though Denise might unleash the full force of her fury, but Frank placed a hand on her arm, silencing her with a weary shake of his head. As they turned to leave, Mike lingered, his gaze filled with a potent mix of resentment and defeat. You'll regret this, Gina, he spat venomously. Mark my words. But as I watched them depart, I felt no regret, only a profound sense of relief and vindication. The shackles of their manipulation had finally been severed, and I was free to chart my own course, to honor the legacy my father had bestowed upon me. In the days and weeks that followed, Paul and I worked tirelessly to bring my vision for the house to life. We renovated and refurbished, creating a warm, welcoming space that embodied Dad's generous spirit and love for community. And as the grand opening day arrived, I knew Dad was there in spirit, surrounding me with the same serenity he had always provided. This was more than just a house. It was a living, breathing testament to his values, a sanctuary where his memory would endure for generations to come. The day of the grand opening arrived with a sense of nervous anticipation. As I stood in the newly renovated garden, taking in the vibrant blooms and meticulously landscaped paths, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride and accomplishment. This space, once tainted by Mike's selfish ambitions, had been transformed into a living embodiment of Dad's spirit, a sanctuary of peace and community, just as he would have wanted. The countless hours of hard work, the battles fought and won, had all led to this moment. You've outdone yourself, Gina. Paul's warm voice broke through my reverie. He moved to stand beside me, his eyes shining with pride. Your father would be in awe of what you've created here. I felt a lump form in my throat, overwhelmed by the weight of Dad's legacy. I just hope I've honored his memory in the way he deserved, Paul. This place means everything to me. Paul placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Have no doubt, my dear. You've turned this house into something truly remarkable, a living testament to Ted's generous spirit. As the first guests began to arrive, I felt a surge of nervous energy coursing through me. This was it, the moment I had fought so hard for, the culmination of a journey that had tested the very limits of my resilience. Yet, as I greeted each visitor with a warm smile, I was struck by the overwhelming sense of community and camaraderie that permeated the air. These were Dad's people, the neighbors and friends, who had embraced his kindness and compassion over the years. One by one, they approached me, offering heartfelt congratulations and sharing cherished memories of the man who had touched so many lives. "Your father was a true gem, Gina," Mrs. Henderson, our elderly neighbor, said with a misty-eyed smile. "He always had a kind word and a helping hand for anyone in need." Mr. Rodriguez, the local grocer, chimed in with a hearty laugh. "Remember when he organized that neighborhood cleanup day? Ted had us all out there bright and early, picking up trash like a bunch of kids on detention." As the anecdotes flowed, I found myself transported back to the simpler times of my childhood, when Dad's unwavering presence had been the bedrock of my world. Each story, each recollection, was a precious thread woven into the tapestry of his legacy. As the day wore on, the garden became a vibrant hub of activity, filled with the laughter of children and the warm embraces of old friends. I moved among the crowd, basking in the joy and sense of belonging that Dad had always fostered. It was in those moments that I truly understood the profound impact he had made, not just on my life, but on an entire community. This place, this sanctuary, was a living embodiment of his values: generosity, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to bringing people together. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the garden, I found myself standing in a quiet corner, taking in the scene with a sense of profound gratitude. Dad's spirit was alive and thriving here, a testament to the power of one man's unwavering love and compassion. "Dad, I hope you're proud," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "This is for you, a legacy that will endure for generations to come." And in that moment I could have sworn I felt his presence, a gentle breeze caressing my cheek, carrying with it the familiar scent of his cologne. A subtle reminder that he was never truly gone, but lived on in the hearts and lives of those he had touched. As Paul approached, his eyes shining with pride, I knew that my journey had reached its ultimate destination, a place of healing, redemption, and an unbreakable connection to the man who had shaped me into the woman I had become. "You did it, Gina," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "You turned this place into something beautiful, a living embodiment of everything your father stood for." And as I looked around at the joyous scene unfolding before me, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the same resilience and grace that Dad had instilled in me. For this was his true legacy, a gift that would continue to nurture and inspire long after I was gone. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down my dress for the 100th time. The restaurant reservation was in an hour, and Travis had promised this would be a special night. My stomach fluttered with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Samantha, you ready?" Travis called from the living room. "Just a minute." I took a deep breath, grabbed my purse, and stepped out. Travis whistled appreciatively. "Wow, babe, you look stunning." I smiled, drinking in his appearance. He was dressed in a sharp suit, his sandy hair perfectly tousled. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He grinned, that charming, boyish grin that had first caught my attention 3 years ago. "Shall we?" He offered his arm, and we headed out. The restaurant was upscale, with soft lighting and white tablecloths. As we perused the menu, I couldn't help but wonder about the occasion. "Travis, what's all this about?" I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. He reached across the table, taking my hand. "Can't a guy treat his girl to a nice dinner?" I raised an eyebrow. "Of course, but you've been acting mysterious all week." He chuckled. "Always the detective, aren't you? Let's order first, okay?" Throughout dinner, Travis kept the conversation light, regaling me with stories from his latest business trip. I found myself relaxing, enjoying the evening. As we finished our dessert, Travis suddenly grew serious. "Sam, these past 3 years have been amazing." My heart began to race. Was this going where I thought it was? "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me," he continued, reaching into his pocket. "I can't imagine my life without you." He pulled out a small velvet box and got down on one knee. The other diners around us fell silent. "Samantha Marie Cooper, will you marry me?" I stared at the sparkling diamond ring, my mind whirling. This was it, the moment I'd dreamed of, yet somehow never quite believed would happen. Travis, my free-spirited, adventure-loving boyfriend, was proposing. "Sam?" Travis prompted, a hint of nervousness in his voice. I realized I'd been silent for too long. "Yes," I breathed. "Yes, I'll marry you." The restaurant erupted in applause as Travis slipped the ring on my finger and pulled me in for a kiss. Later that night, as we lay in bed, reality began to set in. "We're getting married," I murmured, still in disbelief. Travis pulled me closer. "I can't wait to start our life together." I hesitated, then voiced the concern that had been nagging at me. "Travis, you know I love you, but are you sure you're ready for this? Marriage is a big step." He propped himself up on an elbow, looking down at me. "Sam, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. You're the one who grounds me, who makes me want to be a better man." His words warmed my heart, but a small part of me still worried. Travis had always been the spontaneous one, while I was the planner. Could we really make this work? As if reading my thoughts, Travis said, "I know I've been a bit of a wild card, but I'm ready to settle down. With you." I smiled, pushing my doubts aside. "I love you, Travis." "I love you too, Sam. Always." The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee. Travis was in the kitchen, attempting to make breakfast. "Morning, fiancé," he said with a grin, presenting me with a slightly burnt piece of toast. I laughed, kissing him on the cheek. For effort. As I sipped my coffee, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my best friend, Lisa. "Heard the news. Can't believe Travis finally popped the question. Call me ASAP." I was about to reply when Travis's phone rang. His face lit up as he answered. "Mom, yes, she said yes." I froze. I'd completely forgotten about Travis's mother, Mabel, the woman who'd never quite warmed up to me, who always seemed to find fault with everything I did. As Travis chatted excitedly with his mother, I felt a knot forming in my stomach. What had I gotten myself into? I smoothed my wedding dress one last time before stepping out of the dressing room. My heart raced as I walked down the aisle, Travis beaming at me from the altar. Despite my lingering doubts, I pushed them aside. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Fast forward 6 months, and I found myself staring at our joint bank account, my stomach in knots. "Travis," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can you come here for a second?" He sauntered into the room, still in his pajamas despite it being well past noon. "What's up, babe?" I pointed at the screen. "Care to explain this $500 charge at the golf course?" Travis shrugged. "Just a guy's day out. No big deal." "No big deal?" I echoed, incredulous. "Travis, we're supposed to be saving for our future. Remember the house we talked about?" He waved his hand dismissively. "Relax, Sam. We've got plenty of time for all that boring stuff." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "This isn't the first time, Travis. Last month it was that expensive watch, before that—" "Geez, are you keeping tabs on me now?" Travis interrupted, his tone sharp. "I thought we were partners, not warden and prisoner." His words stung. "That's not fair. I'm just trying to be responsible." Travis's face softened. He pulled me into a hug. "I'm sorry, babe. I know you're looking out for us. I'll try to be better, okay?" I nodded, wanting to believe him. But a nagging voice in my head whispered that this conversation was far from over. Later that week, I was struggling with groceries when our neighbor, Edward, appeared out of nowhere. "Need a hand?" he asked, his warm smile instantly putting me at ease. "That would be great, thanks," I said gratefully. As we walked to my apartment, Edward chatted easily about the neighborhood. I found myself relaxing, laughing at his jokes. "Where's Travis?" Edward asked as we reached my door. I hesitated. "Oh, he's out with friends." Edward's eyebrow raised slightly, but he didn't comment. "Well, if you ever need help again, don't hesitate to ask. That's what neighbors are for, right?" I smiled, touched by his kindness. "Thank you, Edward. I really appreciate it." That night, I confronted Travis about his absence. "You said you'd be home to help with errands today." Travis looked up from his phone, annoyed. "Something came up at work. I texted you." "No, you didn't," I said, checking my messages. I had to lug everything myself. If Edward hadn't... "Edward?" Travis's eyes narrowed. "What's he got to do with this?" I explained about the groceries, surprised by Travis's reaction. "He was just being neighborly." Travis scoffed. "Yeah, I bet he was. Look, Sam, I don't like you hanging around other guys." I stared at him, shocked. "Are you serious right now? He's our neighbor, Travis, and maybe if you were around more." "Oh, here we go again," Travis groaned. "You know what? I'm going out. Travis..." Wait, but he was already gone, slamming the door behind him. I sank onto the couch, fighting back tears. This wasn't how I imagined married life would be. Travis's charm, once so alluring, now felt like a mask hiding something darker. The next morning, I woke to find Travis's side of the bed empty. A text from him read, "Crashed at Mike's. See you tonight." I sighed, getting ready for work. As I left the apartment, I ran into Edward again. "Morning, Samantha," he said cheerfully. Then, noticing my expression, "Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Just fine. Have a good day, Edward." As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had to change. The man I married was slipping away, replaced by someone I barely recognized. And the scariest part? A small voice inside me wondered if that might not be such a bad thing after all. I was in the middle of a crucial work presentation when my phone buzzed incessantly. Ignoring it, I focused on my clients. As soon as the meeting ended, I checked my messages. 15 missed calls from Travis. My heart raced as I dialed him back. "Sam, finally." Travis's voice was strained. "It's Mom. Dad, he's gone." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Oh, Travis, I'm so sorry. What happened?" "Heart attack. I'm at the hospital now. Can you come?" I rushed to the hospital, finding Travis slumped in a waiting room chair. His eyes were red-rimmed, his usual charm replaced by raw grief. I held him as he sobbed, my own heart aching for his loss. Days blurred into weeks as we helped Mabel with funeral arrangements and settling affairs. Travis threw himself into taking care of his mother, spending more and more time at her house. One evening, as I was heating up another solo dinner, Travis called. "Hey, babe, I'm staying at Mom's again tonight." I sighed, frustration bubbling up. "Travis, it's been 3 weeks. When are you coming home?" "Sam, she needs me. You understand, right?" I bit back a retort. "Of course. It's just, I miss you." There was a pause. "I miss you too. Look, why don't we bring Mom to stay with us for a while? It'll be easier on everyone." My stomach dropped. "Stay with us? For how long?" "Just until she's back on her feet. A couple of weeks, tops." I wanted to protest, but couldn't find the words. "Okay," I said finally, "if you think it's best." The next day, Travis arrived with Mabel and several suitcases. I plastered on a smile, helping them settle in. That night, as we lay in bed, I whispered, "Travis, are you sure about this? Our apartment's not that big." He turned to me, his expression hard. "She's my mother, Sam. Where else is she supposed to go?" I fell silent, the distance between us feeling wider than ever. Days turned into weeks, and Mabel showed no signs of leaving. She rearranged our kitchen, criticized my cooking, and monopolized the TV with her favorite shows. Travis seemed oblivious to my growing frustration. One evening, I came home to find Mabel had redecorated our living room. "Surprise," she exclaimed. "Doesn't it look so much better now?" I stared at the frilly curtains and doilies covering every surface. "Mabel, you can't just change our home without asking." Her face fell. "I was only trying to help. Travis said it was fine." "Did he now?" I muttered, marching to our bedroom where Travis was lounging. "Hey, babe," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Travis, we need to talk about your mother." Travis, he sighed. "What about her?" "She's taking over our home, and you're letting her." Travis sat up, frowning. "She's going through a tough time, Sam. Can't you be more understanding?" "Understanding?" I exploded. "I've been nothing but understanding. But this is our home, Travis. Our life. When is she leaving?" A look of surprise crossed his face. "Leaving? Sam, she can't go back to that empty house. She's staying here." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "For how long?" Travis shrugged. "As long as she needs." I stared at him, disbelief turning to anger. "And when were you planning on discussing this with me? Your wife?" "I didn't think I needed your permission to help my own mother," Travis snapped. "It's not about permission, it's about respect," I shouted. "This affects both of us, Travis. Or, have you forgotten we're supposed to be partners?" Travis stood up, his face thunderous. "You know what? I can't deal with this right now. I'm going out." As he stormed out, I sank onto the bed, tears of frustration streaming down my face. This wasn't the life I had signed up for. Something had to give, and I was terrified it might be me. I stared at the glossy brochure in my hands, my heart racing with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The luxury apartment complex looked like a dream come true. Spacious rooms, a state-of-the-art kitchen, and a breathtaking view of the city skyline. "What do you think, babe?" Travis asked, his eyes gleaming with enthusiasm. This could be our fresh start. I hesitated. "It's beautiful, but Travis, can we afford this? With your mom living with us and our current expenses." He waved off my concerns. "Sam, this is an investment in our future. We deserve this after everything we've been through." I couldn't deny the allure of a new beginning, a chance to escape the cramped quarters we'd been sharing with Mabel. How would we manage the down payment? Travis's smile widened. That's the best part. I've found a way to make it work. We just need to sign the papers, and it's ours. Against my better judgment, I found myself nodding. Okay, let's do it. The next day, we met with the real estate agent. As we went through the paperwork, a detail caught my eye. Wait, why is only my name on the loan application? Travis squeezed my hand. It's just a formality, Sam. My credit isn't great right now because of some business investments. But don't worry, we're in this together. I frowned, a knot forming in my stomach. I don't know, Travis. This is a huge commitment. Do you trust me? He asked, his eyes locking with mine. I swallowed hard. Of course, but then trust me on this. It's the smart move, I promise. Against the screaming protests of my intuition, I signed the papers. Travis's triumphant grin should have been reassuring, but instead, it sent a chill down my spine. Weeks later, we moved into our new apartment. As I unpacked boxes in our gleaming kitchen, Mabel shuffled in, her face pinched with disapproval. I don't know why we had to move, she grumbled. Our old place was just fine. I bit back a retort. This place has more space for all of us, Mabel. You'll get used to it. She harumphed and wandered off. I sighed, wondering for the 1,000th time when she'd return to her own home. That evening, as Travis and I sat on our new balcony, I broached the subject. Travis, have you talked to your mom about her plans? He tensed. What do you mean? Well, we moved here for a fresh start, right? I thought maybe she'd be ready to go back to her place soon. Travis's expression darkened. Sam, we've been over this. Mom needs us right now. But for how long? I pressed. It's been months and she's showing no signs of leaving. Because she's not going to leave, Travis snapped. This is her home now, too. I felt like I'd been doused in ice water. What? When did we decide this? I decided it, he said firmly. She's my mother, Sam. Where else is she supposed to go? But Travis, this apartment, the loan, it's all in my name. We can't afford. He cut me off. We'll make it work. You're being selfish, Sam. I thought you were better than this. As he stormed off, leaving me alone on the balcony, the full weight of my situation crashed down on me. I was trapped. Financially responsible for a home I couldn't afford, living with a mother-in-law who'd never leave, and married to a man I barely recognized anymore. My phone buzzed with a text. It was Edward. Hey neighbor, noticed you moved. Everything okay? I stared at the message, tears welling in my eyes. In that moment, I realized I had a choice to make. I could continue down this path of misery, or I could fight back. But fighting back meant admitting that my marriage, my life, everything I'd built, it was all crumbling around me. With shaking hands, I typed a reply to Edward. No, everything is not okay. Can we talk? I stared at the stack of bills on the kitchen counter, my hands shaking. The mortgage payment was due in 3 days, and our account was nearly empty. Again, I took a deep breath and dialed Travis's number. Hey, babe, he answered, his voice cheerful. What's up? Travis, we need to talk about the mortgage, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's due soon, and we're short. Again. There was a pause. Oh, right. Listen, can you cover it this month? I've got some big deals in the works, but they haven't come through yet. I felt my blood pressure rising. Travis, I've been covering it for the past 3 months. This was supposed to be our dream home. Remember? Our shared responsibility? I know, he said, his tone dismissive, but you're doing so well at work, and I'm still trying to get my business off the ground. It's just temporary, I promise. Before I could respond, I heard Mabel's voice in the background. Travis, dear, are we still going shopping later? My jaw clenched. Is that your mother? Are you taking her shopping while we can't even pay our mortgage? Sam, don't start, Travis warned. Look, I've got to go. We'll figure it out, okay? Love you. The line went dead. I stared at the phone in disbelief, then slumped into a chair, fighting back tears. A knock at the door startled me. I opened it to find Edward, holding a basket of muffins. Hey, neighbor, he said with a warm smile. Thought you could use a pick-me-up. I must have looked worse than I thought because his expression quickly turned to concern. Samantha, what's wrong? Before I knew it, I was spilling everything. The financial strain, Travis's irresponsibility, Mabel's constant presence. Edward listened patiently, his kind eyes never leaving mine. I'm so sorry you're going through this, he said when I finished. Have you considered talking to a financial advisor? Or maybe a lawyer? I shook my head. I can't afford either right now. And besides, Travis would never agree to it. Edward frowned. Samantha, this isn't just about Travis anymore. You need to protect yourself. His words hit me hard. I'd been so focused on keeping our marriage afloat that I'd neglected my own well-being. Just then, Travis and Mabel burst through the door, laden with shopping bags. Travis froze when he saw Edward. What's going on here? Edward just stopped by to say hello, I said quickly. Thanks for the muffins, Edward. I'll see you around. After Edward left, Travis rounded on me. What was he doing here? He's our neighbor, Travis. He was being friendly. Travis scoffed. A little too friendly, if you ask me. I felt something snap inside me. Oh, that's rich coming from you. Where were you all day? Shopping, while I'm here trying to figure out how to pay our bills. Don't be dramatic, Sam, Travis said, rolling his eyes. I told you I'll handle it. When? I demanded. When are you going to start acting like a responsible adult? Mabel chimed in, her voice shrill. Don't you dare speak to my son that way, after everything he's done for you. Enough! No, I shouted, surprising even myself. I can't do this anymore. I'm drowning here, Travis. I need help. Travis's face hardened. What are you saying? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I'm saying that things need to change, now. Either we go to couples counseling and financial planning, or what? Travis challenged. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Or I'm done. I'll file for divorce. The silence that followed was deafening. Travis stared at me, shock and anger warring on his face. Mabel gasped dramatically, clutching her pearls. In that moment, looking at their stunned faces, I realized I'd reached a crossroads. The life I'd built with Travis, the future I'd imagined, it was all hanging by a thread. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep holding on. Your choice, Travis, I said quietly. What's it going to be? I paced our living room, anxiety gnawing at my insides. It had been 2 days since my ultimatum to Travis, and he'd barely spoken me since. The tension in our apartment was suffocating. The front door opened and Travis walked in. My heart raced as I searched his face for any sign of what he'd decided. Sam, we need to talk, he said, his voice unnervingly calm. I nodded, bracing myself. Okay. What have you decided? Travis took a deep breath. I want a divorce. The words hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything, I hadn't truly believed he'd choose this. What, Travis? I didn't mean. I know what you meant, he interrupted, but it made me realize something. This isn't working, Sam. It hasn't been for a long time. I felt like I was drowning. But we can fix this. Counseling, like I suggested. It's too late for that, Travis said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. There's someone else. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Someone else, I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Travis nodded, looking almost relieved to have it out. Her name is Stella. We've been seeing each other for... How long is a while? A while, I demanded, anger starting to replace the shock. He hesitated. About 8 months. 8 months. The timeline hit me like a truck. Since before we moved here, before you convinced me to take out that loan... Travis at least had the decency to look ashamed. I'm sorry, Sam. I never meant for it to happen. But Stella and we connect in a way you and I never did. I laughed bitterly. And let me guess, she doesn't mind your mother living with you? Actually, Travis said, straightening up, Mom's moving in with Stella and me. We've found a place that's perfect for the 3 of us. The casual way he said it, like he was discussing weekend plans, made something snap inside me. Perfect for the 3 of you? What about me, Travis? What about the life we built, the mortgage that's in my name? He shrugged, and in that moment I saw him clearly for the first time. The charm, the promises, it had all been a facade. You're doing well at work. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Figure it out, I repeated, incredulous. You saddle me with a mortgage I can't afford, cheat on me for months, and now you're just walking away? I've already spoken to a lawyer, Travis said, pulling out a folder. These are the divorce papers. It'll be easier if you just sign them now. I stared at the folder, feeling like I was in some surreal nightmare. You want me to sign right now? Just like that? It's for the best, Sam, he said, his tone patronizing. A clean break. My hand shook as I took the folder. I flipped through the pages, the legal jargon swimming before my eyes. One phrase jumped out at me. The wife agrees to assume all financial responsibilities related to the marital home. You're leaving me with all the debt? I asked, my voice rising. After everything you've done? Travis had the audacity to look annoyed. Come on, Sam. Don't make this difficult. It's a fair deal. I looked at him, this man I thought I knew, this man I had loved. In his eyes I saw nothing but cold indifference. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I meant nothing to him. I never had. "Get out," I whispered. "What?" "Get out," I screamed, throwing the folder at him. "Get out of my house, you lying, cheating bastard." Travis backed away, hands raised. "Fine. I'll give you some time to calm down, but I'll be back for those papers, Sam. This is happening whether you like it or not." As the door slammed behind him, I collapsed onto the floor, sobs racking my body. My world had just imploded, and I was left alone in the ruins, drowning in debt and betrayal. Through my tears, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked broken, defeated. But as I held her gaze, I felt something stir deep inside, a spark of defiance, of rage. Travis thought he could walk all over me and get away with it. He was wrong. Dead wrong. I stared at the empty spaces in my apartment, the silence deafening. Travis had moved out yesterday, taking Mabel with him. The divorce papers lay unsigned on the coffee table, mocking me. My phone buzzed. Another text from Travis. "Sign the papers, Sam. My lawyer's getting impatient." I threw the phone across the room, watching it bounce off the couch. The anger that had been simmering for days suddenly boiled over. I grabbed my keys and stormed out, needing to escape the suffocating walls. As I reached the elevator, I ran into Edward. His concerned eyes met mine. "Samantha, are you okay?" I laughed bitterly. "Oh, I'm fantastic. My cheating ex-husband has left me with a mountain of debt and run off with his mistress. I'm living the dream." Edward's face softened. "I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do?" I was about to brush him off when an idea struck me. "Actually, yes. You're in real estate, right? I need your help." An hour later, we sat in a cafe, poring over documents. Edward's expression grew grimmer with each page. "Samantha, this is worse than I thought. The loan terms are predatory and the property value is inflated. Travis really screwed you over." The confirmation of Travis's betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. "What can I do?" Edward hesitated. "There might be a way, but it's not exactly legal." I leaned forward, desperation overriding my usual caution. "Tell me." As Edward outlined his plan, a part of me recoiled at the idea. But a larger part, the part consumed by rage and hurt, latched onto it like a lifeline. That night, I sat at my computer, fingers flying over the keyboard. Years of managing Travis's accounts gave me intimate knowledge of his finances. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for: hidden accounts, shady transactions, evidence of fraud. My phone buzzed again. "Travis, where are the signed papers, Sam? Don't make this difficult." I smiled grimly, typing out a response. "We need to talk. Meet me at the cafe tomorrow at 2 p.m. The next day, I arrived early, setting up my laptop. My heart raced as I saw Travis saunter in, his usual cocky grin in place. "Finally come to your senses?" he asked, sliding into the seat across from me. I took a deep breath. "Not exactly. I've been doing some digging, Travis. Care to explain these?" I turned the laptop towards him, showing the evidence of his financial misdeeds. The color drained from his face. "How did you—" "Doesn't matter," I cut him off. "What matters is what happens next. You have two choices. One, you take on the mortgage and all associated debts. Or two, I turn this over to the authorities." Travis's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing. You'd go down with me." "Maybe," I conceded, "but I have nothing left to lose thanks to you. Can you say the same?" For a moment, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. Then his face hardened. "Nice try, Sam. But you forget. I know you. You don't have the guts to go through with this." He stood up, looming over me. "Sign the papers, or I'll make your life a living hell. You think you're struggling now? Just wait." As he stormed out, leaving me trembling in my seat, I realized he was right. The old Samantha wouldn't have the courage to follow through. But I wasn't that woman anymore. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized earlier. "Hello? Is this the FBI's Financial Crimes Division? I'd like to report a case of fraud." As I began detailing Travis's crimes, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. There was no going back now. I was all in, for better or worse. The game had changed, and this time I was determined to win. My heart pounded as I stood outside the quaint suburban house. This was it, the moment of truth. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. A pretty blonde woman answered, her smile faltering as she saw me. "Can I help you? Are you Stella?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. She nodded, confusion evident on her face. I'm Samantha, Travis's wife. The color drained from Stella's face. I don't understand. Travis said he was divorced. Not quite, I said, my anger rising. Is he here? As if on cue, Travis appeared behind Stella. His eyes widened in shock. Sam? What are you doing here? I pushed past them into the house, Stella too stunned to stop me. We need to talk, all of us. In the living room, I saw Mabel looking bewildered. Samantha, what's going on? I turned to face them all. It's time for the truth to come out. Travis, why don't you start by explaining to Stella how you're still married? Or maybe you'd like to tell her about the fraudulent financial dealings I uncovered. Travis's face contorted with rage. You had no right. I had every right, I shouted. You left me drowning in debt, Travis. Debt you tricked me into taking on. Stella's voice was barely a whisper. Is this true? Travis's charm kicked in, his voice smooth. Baby, it's not what it sounds like. Sam's just bitter. Don't you dare, I cut him off. I turned to Stella. I have proof of everything, the affairs, the fraud, all of it. I pulled out my phone, showing her the documents I'd gathered. Stella's face crumpled as she scrolled through, the evidence undeniable. How could you? She whispered to Travis. Travis's facade finally cracked. I can explain, but there was no explaining away the truth. As Stella and Mabel absorbed the reality of Travis's deceptions, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. So what now? Travis asked, his voice hollow. You've ruined everything. Are you happy? I looked at him, this man I once loved, and felt nothing but pity. This isn't about being happy, Travis. The FBI is already investigating your finances. You're going to face the consequences of your actions. Mabel let out a strangled sob. My boy. What have you done? I turned to her, my voice softening. Mabel, I'm sorry, but you can't stay here anymore. I've arranged for you to move to a nice assisted living facility. Travis will cover the costs. It's the least he can do. Travis's head snapped up. You can't do that. Actually, I can, I said, my voice firm. It's all part of the deal I worked out with the prosecutor. You take responsibility for your actions or you face the full extent of the law. The fight seemed to drain out of Travis. He slumped onto the couch, head in his hands. Stella, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. I want in on this deal. He lied to me too. Used me. I nodded, a spark of understanding passing between us. Of course. We'll make sure he pays alimony to both of us. As the reality of his situation sank in, Travis looked up at me, his eyes pleading. Sam, please. We can work this out. I'll do anything. For a moment, I remembered the charming man I fell in love with. But that man was gone, if he ever truly existed. It's too late for that, Travis, I said softly. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. I turned to leave, feeling lighter than I had in years. At the door, I paused and looked back at the chaos I was leaving behind. Stella was crying, Mabel was praying, and Travis looked broken, but I felt no satisfaction, no joy in their pain. Only relief that it was finally over. As I stepped out into the sunlight, I took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I felt free. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it, on my own terms. I pulled out my phone and dialed Edward's number. It's done, I said when he answered. Thank you for everything. You did it, Samantha, he replied, his voice warm. I'm proud of you. As I hung up, I smiled. The shadows of betrayal were finally lifting, and I was stepping into the light of a new day, stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. I watched Wyatt's car disappear down the street, the familiar ache in my chest growing stronger with each passing second. My boy, always working so hard for us. I hobbled back inside my cane, tapping a steady rhythm on the hardwood floor. Wyatt's gone, then? Cora's voice drifted from the kitchen, cool and disinterested. Yes, he just left, I replied, making my way to join her. He said he'd call when he lands in Chicago. Cora sat at the table, scrolling through her phone. She barely glanced up as I entered. I'm sure he will. I lowered myself into a chair, wincing at the twinge in my hip. I thought we could have breakfast together, I suggested, trying to keep my tone light. I can whip up some pancakes. She finally looked at me, her expression unreadable. No need, Lenora. I have errands to run. I watched as she stood, gathering her purse and keys. But it's barely 8 o'clock. Surely you have time for a quick bite? Cora sighed, her frustration evident. I said I have errands. I don't need to explain myself to you. The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone in the suddenly too quiet house. I pushed myself up, determined to make those pancakes anyway. As I mixed the batter, my mind wandered to happier times, when this kitchen was filled with laughter and the smell of my late husband's famous blueberry muffins. The phone's shrill ring startled me out of my reverie. I answered, hoping to hear Wyatt's voice. "Lenora? It's Margie. You won't believe what I just saw." My old friend's tone sent a chill down my spine. "What is it, Margie?" "I was driving past that new cafe on Main Street, and I swear I saw Cora there with a man. They looked cozy." The bowl slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor and splattering batter everywhere. "What do you mean, cozy?" Margie's voice lowered. Holding hands across the table, he kissed her cheek when they got up to leave. My heart raced as I gripped the counter for support. There must be some explanation. Maybe it was a relative or... "Lenora, honey, I know what I saw, and the way he was looking at her, that was no relative." I sank to the floor, my legs no longer able to hold me up. "What do I do, Margie? Should I tell Wyatt?" "Not yet," she advised. "We need more proof. Can you check her phone or computer?" The thought of snooping made me uncomfortable, but the image of Cora with another man burned in my mind. I'll see what I can find out. After hanging up, I slowly cleaned up the spilled batter, my thoughts in turmoil. How could Cora do this to Wyatt? To our family? Hours passed as I waited for her return, each minute stretching into an eternity. When I finally heard her key in the lock, I steeled myself for confrontation. Cora breezed in, shopping bags in hand. "Oh, you're still up," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "Where were you?" I asked, hating how my voice shook. She raised an eyebrow. "I told you, running errands." "Why?" I took a deep breath. "Margie saw you at the cafe on Main Street, with a man." Cora's face hardened. "So you're spying on me now? Having your friends follow me around?" "That's not what happened." She cut me off, her voice ice cold. "I don't have to explain myself to you, Lenora. This is my house, and I'll come and go as I please." "This is Wyatt's house," I countered, finding my strength. "And mine. You're here because we welcomed you into our family." Cora laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Family? Is that what you call this prison? Living under your constant scrutiny, never good enough for your precious son?" She stormed upstairs, leaving me shaken and more certain than ever that something was terribly wrong. As I made my way to bed, one thought echoed in my mind. I had to protect Wyatt, no matter the cost. The next morning I woke with a sense of dread weighing heavily on my chest. Cora's words from the night before echoed in my mind as I slowly made my way downstairs. The house was eerily quiet. No sign of my daughter-in-law. I just settled at the kitchen table with a cup of tea when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Wyatt. "Landed safely, Mom. Miss you already. Give Cora a hug for me." My heart clenched. If only he knew. The day dragged on, each hour filled with worry and suspicion. By late afternoon, I couldn't bear the silence any longer. I needed to get out to clear my head. My physical therapy session wasn't until tomorrow, but a short walk might do me good. I grabbed my cane and headed for the front door, only to find it wouldn't budge. Frowning, I tried again, pushing harder this time. That's when I noticed the chain lock was engaged from the inside. "Cora?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Are you there? The door's locked." Silence. I knocked louder, panic rising in my throat. "Cora, please let me in." Finally, I heard footsteps approaching. The door opened a crack, Cora's face appearing in the narrow gap. Her eyes were cold, her lips pressed into a thin line. "What are you doing out there?" she asked, her tone dripping with disdain. "I went for a walk," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why is the chain on? I live here too, you know." Cora's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Do you? Sometimes I wonder. This is supposed to be my home, Lenora, my sanctuary, but with you here it feels like a prison." I recoiled as if she'd slapped me. "Cora, please, let's talk about this. We're family." "Family?" she spat. "You're not my family. You're just a burden Wyatt refuses to let go of." With that, she slammed the door in my face. I stood there, stunned, my hand still raised to knock. Tears welled up in my eyes as the reality of the situation hit me. I was locked out of my own home, rejected by the woman my son loved. My legs trembled, threatening to give out. I needed help. Fumbling with my phone, I called the only person I could think of. "Margie, it's Lenora. I need you." 20 minutes later, Margie's beat-up station wagon pulled into the driveway. She hurried over to me, her face etched with concern. "Oh, honey," she said, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "What happened?" Through tears, I recounted the events of the past 2 days. Cora's mysterious outing, our argument, and now this cruel lockout. Margie listened, her expression growing darker with each word. "That little witch," she muttered. "Come on, let's get you out of here. You can stay with me tonight." As we drove away, I caught a glimpse of Cora watching from an upstairs window. The look on her face sent a chill down my spine. At Margie's cozy bungalow, I sank into her overstuffed couch, feeling utterly drained. My friend bustled about, making tea and muttering under her breath about ungrateful daughters-in-law. "What am I going to do, Margie?" I asked, my voice small and defeated. "I can't go back there, not after this." Margie sat beside me, taking my hand in hers. "We're going to fight, that's what. Cora can't treat you like this. It's time Wyatt knew the truth about his wife." I shook my head, fear gripping my heart. But what if he doesn't believe me? What if I lose him too? "Lenora, look at me," Margie said firmly. "Your son loves you. He deserves to know what's happening in his own home. We'll gather evidence, make sure he sees Cora for who she really is." As I nodded, a new determination sparked within me. Cora might have won this battle, but I wasn't about to let her destroy my family. Whatever it took, I would protect Wyatt and reclaim my place in our home. Little did I know, the war was just beginning. I woke up on Margie's couch, disoriented and stiff. For a moment, I forgot why I was there. Then it all came rushing back. Cora's betrayal, the locked door, the cruel words. My heart sank as I realized this wasn't just a bad dream. Margie bustled into the living room, a steaming mug of coffee in each hand. "How are you holding up, honey?" she asked, handing me a cup. I took a sip, grateful for the warmth. "I've been better," I admitted. "I just can't believe this is happening." Margie sat beside me, her face set with determination. "We need to tell Wyatt what's going on. He deserves to know the truth about Cora." The thought of breaking my son's heart made me nauseous. But what if he doesn't believe me? What if I lose him too? "Lenora," Margie said firmly, "your son loves you. He needs to know what's happening in his own home. We'll gather evidence, make sure he sees Cora for who she really is." I nodded, a plan forming in my mind. "You're right. I can't let her get away with this." We spent the morning strategizing. Margie suggested we drive by the house to see if Cora was up to anything suspicious. As we pulled onto my street, my heart raced. There, in the driveway, was a sleek sports car I didn't recognize. "That's him," I whispered, my hands shaking. "That's the man Cora was with at the cafe." Margie's eyes narrowed. "Got you now, you little home wrecker," she muttered, pulling out her phone to snap a few pictures. We watched as Cora emerged from the house, laughing and hanging on the mystery man's arm. The sight of her so carefree while my world was crumbling made my blood boil. "I need to call Wyatt," I said, my voice trembling. "He needs to know." Back at Margie's, I paced the living room, phone in hand. Finally, I gathered my courage and dialed. "Mom?" Wyatt's voice was warm, concerned. "Is everything okay? You never call during my trips." I took a deep breath. "Wyatt, honey, there's something I need to tell you. It's about Cora." "What about her? Is she all right?" The worry in his voice nearly broke me. "She's fine, but, Wyatt, she's been seeing someone else. I saw her with him today at our house." Silence. Then, "What are you talking about, Mom? That's impossible. Cora would never—" "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," I interrupted, my voice cracking. "But it's true. Margie saw them together at a cafe, and today we saw his car in the driveway. I have pictures." I heard Wyatt's sharp intake of breath. "No," he whispered. "No, there has to be some mistake." "I wish there was," I said softly. "But Wyatt, there's more. Cora locked me out of the house yesterday. She said I was a burden, that living with me was unbearable." The line went quiet for so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Then Wyatt's voice came back, hard and cold. "I'm coming home. Now, don't confront her, Mom. Just stay with Margie. I'll be there as soon as I can." After we hung up, I collapsed onto the couch, emotionally drained. Margie sat beside me, rubbing my back soothingly. "You did the right thing," she assured me. "Wyatt needed to know." I nodded, but guilt gnawed at me. Had I just destroyed my son's marriage? What if I was wrong about everything? As if reading my thoughts, Margie squeezed my hand. "Don't you dare start doubting yourself, Lenora. We both know what we saw. Cora made her bed. Now she has to lie in it." Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Cora. "Where are you?" "Come home now. We need to talk." I showed Margie the message, my hands shaking. "What do I do?" Margie's eyes flashed with anger. "You stay right here. That woman doesn't get to order you around anymore. Let her stew until Wyatt gets home." As I settled in for an agonizing wait, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the calm before the storm. Whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The early morning sun barely peeked through the curtains as I sat in my living room, my heart pounding. Wyatt had arrived late last night, his face a mask of pain and anger. Now we waited for Cora to return from wherever she'd spent the night. Margie sat beside me, her presence a comforting anchor in the storm that was about to break. "Are you sure you want to do this, Mom?" Wyatt asked, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. I reached out and squeezed his hand. "We have to, honey. Cora needs to face what she's done." The sound of a key in the lock made us all freeze. Cora walked in, her eyes widening as she took in the scene before her. "Wyatt? What are you doing home?" My son stood, his shoulders tense. "I think you know why I'm here, Cora." She glanced at me, her expression hardening. "What lies has she been telling you?" "They're not lies," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We saw you with him, Cora, at the cafe and here at the house." Cora's face paled, but she quickly recovered. "So you've been spying on me? That's rich, coming from you, Lenora." Wyatt stepped between us. "Don't you dare try to turn this around on my mother. I saw the pictures. Cora, I know everything." Just then a car pulled into the driveway. Through the window I saw a man get out, the same one from the cafe. My breath caught in my throat as he approached the front door. "Who's that?" Wyatt demanded, his voice dangerously low. Cora's eyes darted between Wyatt and the door. It's not what you think." The doorbell rang, shattering the tense silence. Wyatt strode to the door and yanked it open. "Who the hell are you?" The man looked startled. I'm here to see Cora." "Is she home?" "Oh, she's home all right," Wyatt growled, grabbing the man's collar and dragging him inside. "Now, both of you are going to explain what's going on." Cora's face crumpled. "Wyatt, please, I can explain." "Then start talking," he snapped. What followed was a painful confession. Cora admitted to the affair, tears streaming down her face as she detailed her unhappiness in the marriage. She claimed Wyatt was never home, always working, and that living with me was suffocating her. "You're never here," Cora cried. "Living with your mother is unbearable. I felt so alone, so trapped." Wyatt's face was a storm of emotions. "So instead of talking to me, you decided to cheat? To treat my mother like garbage?" The other man, who introduced himself as David, looked uncomfortable. "Look, I didn't know she was married. Cora told me she was divorced." I watched as my son's world crumbled around him. The pain in his eyes was almost unbearable. "I want you both out of my house," Wyatt said, his voice eerily calm. "Now." Cora reached for him. "Wyatt, please, we can work this out." He jerked away from her touch. "There's nothing to work out. We're done, Cora. I want a separation." As Cora and David left, the house fell into a heavy silence. Wyatt collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. I moved to comfort him, but he stood abruptly. "I need some air," he muttered, heading for the door. "Wyatt, wait," I called, but he was already gone. Margie put her arm around me. "Give him time, Lenora. He's been through a lot." I nodded, fighting back tears. We'd won in a way. The truth was out, Cora's betrayal exposed, but looking at the wreckage of my son's marriage, I couldn't help but wonder, at what cost? As I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of our shattered family, I knew one thing for certain: the real battle was just beginning. Somehow, I had to find a way to help Wyatt heal, to rebuild our lives from the ashes of Cora's betrayal. And deep down, a part of me whispered that this wasn't over. Cora wouldn't go down without a fight, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. The days following Cora's departure were a blur of pain and confusion. Wyatt moved through the house like a ghost, barely speaking, his eyes hollow. I ached to comfort him, but every attempt seemed to push him further away. One morning, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of papers. "Wyatt?" I asked gently. "What are those?" He looked up, his face a mask of anguish. "Divorce papers. Cora's lawyer sent them over." My heart sank. Despite everything, a small part of me had hoped they might reconcile. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." Wyatt's laugh was bitter. "Don't be. You were right about her all along." I reached out to touch his hand, but he pulled away. "I need some air," he muttered. heading for the door. As it slammed behind him, I felt a surge of determination. I couldn't let Cora destroy my son like this. I needed proof, irrefutable evidence of her betrayal. I called Margie, and together we hatched a plan. We'd go to the cafe where Cora and David often met, hoping to catch them in the act. The next afternoon found us huddled in a corner booth, nervously sipping coffee. "Are you sure about this, Lenora?" Margie whispered. Before I could answer, the bell above the door chimed. My breath caught as Cora walked in, followed closely by David. They settled at a table across the room, oblivious to our presence. Margie squeezed my hand. "Now's our chance," she said, pulling out her phone. We watched in stunned silence as Cora leaned in, kissing David passionately. Margie's camera clicked furiously, capturing every damning moment. Suddenly, Cora's eyes met mine, her face contorted with rage as she stormed over to our table. "You miserable old hag," she hissed. "Can't you just leave me alone?" I stood, my legs shaking but my voice steady. "You're the one who needs to leave us alone, Cora. You've hurt Wyatt enough." She laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "Hurt him? Please. I set him free. He was suffocating, tied to you in that house. You can't prove anything, Lenora. This is all your fault." Something in me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and anger came pouring out. "My fault? You're the one who cheated, who lied, who treated my son like garbage, and now we have proof." I gestured to Margie's phone, and Cora's face paled. She lunged for it, but Margie was quicker, snatching it away. "It's over, Cora," I said firmly. "Go live your life, but leave my family alone." As Cora stormed out, David trailing behind her, I collapsed back into the booth, exhausted but triumphant. Back at home, I showed Wyatt the pictures. His face crumpled as he scrolled through them, each image a fresh wound. "I can't believe she'd do this," he whispered. I wrapped my arms around him, and this time he didn't pull away. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart, but now you know the truth." Wyatt nodded, wiping his eyes. "You're right. I need to end this for good." Together we packed up the last of Cora's belongings. As Wyatt carried the boxes to the porch, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. We were finally free of her toxicity. That night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My blood ran cold as I read Cora's words. "This isn't over, Lenora. You'll regret crossing me." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Cora's threat hung in the air, a dark cloud over our fragile peace. I knew then that this battle was far from over. The question was, how far was I willing to go to protect my son and our family? As I drifted off to sleep, one thought crystallized in my mind. Whatever Cora had planned, I would be ready. This time I wouldn't let her catch us off guard. The war might not be over, but I was determined to win. Weeks passed, and slowly, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Wyatt threw himself into work, often coming home late, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. I tried to give him space, but my heart ached to see him so broken. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Wyatt stumbled through the door, his tie askew and eyes red-rimmed. "Wyatt?" I asked, alarmed. "What's wrong?" He collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. "I saw Cora today," he mumbled. She looked happy, Mom, with him." I felt a surge of anger. How dare she flaunt her new relationship when my son was still in pieces? But I pushed it down, focusing on Wyatt. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, wrapping my arms around him. "I'm so sorry." He leaned into me, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. In that moment, I made a decision. We couldn't keep living like this, trapped in the shadow of Cora's betrayal. The next morning, I called Margie. "We need to do something," I told her. "Wyatt's falling apart, and I can't just stand by and watch." Margie agreed to come over, and soon we were brainstorming ways to help Wyatt move on. As we talked, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I might not be able to mend my son's broken heart, but I could damn well try to make his life easier. We decided to start small. Margie and I began inviting Wyatt to join us for dinners, game nights, anything to get him out of the house and his own head. At first, he resisted, but slowly I saw glimpses of my old Wyatt returning. One Saturday, as we worked together in the garden, something we hadn't done since before his marriage, Wyatt turned to me with a small smile. "Thanks, Mom," he said softly, "for everything." I felt my heart swell with love and pride. We were going to be okay. But just as things were looking up, disaster struck. I was in the kitchen when I heard a crash from the living room. I rushed in to find Wyatt on the floor, clutching his ankle, his face contorted in pain. "What happened?" I cried, kneeling beside him. tripped," he gasped. "I think it's broken." The next few hours were a blur of ambulances and emergency rooms. As we waited for the doctor, my phone buzzed with a text. It was Cora. "Heard about Wyatt. Guess you can't take care of him after all. Maybe he needs his wife back." I stared at the screen, my blood boiling. How dare she? And how did she even know? Before I could respond, the doctor arrived with the verdict. Wyatt's ankle was indeed broken. He'd need surgery and weeks of recovery. As we drove home, Wyatt silent and brooding in the passenger seat, I felt a wave of panic. How was I going to manage this? My own mobility was still limited from the stroke. How could I care for Wyatt and keep up with the house? That night, as Wyatt slept fitfully upstairs, I sat at the kitchen table, feeling more overwhelmed than I had in years. Cora's text haunted me. Was she right? Was I not enough for Wyatt? Just then, my phone lit up with another message. It was Margie. "Heard about Wyatt. I'm coming over first thing tomorrow. We'll figure this out together." I felt tears prick my eyes, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. We weren't alone in this. As I climbed the stairs to check on Wyatt, I steeled myself for the challenges ahead. Cora might think she'd won, that she could swoop in and reclaim her place in Wyatt's life, but she was wrong. We'd weathered storms before, Wyatt and I, and we'd weather this one too, together. But as I drifted off to sleep, a nagging worry gnawed at the edges of my mind. What if Cora was right? What if I wasn't enough? The coming days would test us all, and I prayed I had the strength to see us through. The weeks following Wyatt's accident were a blur of doctor's appointments, physical therapy sessions, and sleepless nights. I pushed myself to the limit, determined to prove Cora wrong. I could take care of my son. I had to. One morning, as I struggled to help Wyatt down the stairs, my own legs trembling with the effort, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the hallway mirror. We looked exhausted, defeated. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I really helping, or just making things worse? "Mom," Wyatt said softly, "maybe we should hire some help." I shook my head, forcing a smile. "We're managing just fine, honey. I've got this." But the truth was, I didn't have it. Not even close. That afternoon, I had my own physical therapy appointment. As I worked through my exercises, my therapist, Sarah, noticed my distraction. "Lenora," she said gently, "you're pushing yourself too hard. Your progress has been amazing, but if you don't take care of yourself, you'll end up back where you started." I felt tears prick my eyes. "I don't have a choice," I whispered. "Wyatt needs me." Sarah squeezed my hand. "You can't pour from an empty cup, Lenora. It's okay to ask for help." As I left the clinic, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Heard Wyatt's not doing so well. Maybe he needs his wife back. I can take better care of him than you ever could." My blood ran cold. Cora? I was so distracted by the message that I didn't notice the car speeding through the parking lot. I froze, my cane slipping on the wet pavement. Suddenly, a hand grabbed my arm, yanking me back just as the car whizzed by. "Mrs. Henderson, are you all right?" I looked up to see David, Cora's former lover, of all people. He steadied me, concern etched on his face. "I'm fine," I stammered, pulling away. "What are you doing here?" He looked sheepish. I've been meaning to talk to you about Cora." My heart raced. "What about her?" "She's been acting strange lately, talking about getting Wyatt back, no matter what it takes. I think she might do something drastic." Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Margie, her voice frantic. "Lenora, you need to get home now. Cora's here and she's demanding to see Wyatt." Panic surged through me. "Don't let her in. I'm on my way." I turned to David. "I need a ride. Now." The drive home was agonizing. Every red light felt like an eternity. When we finally pulled up, I saw Cora's car in the driveway, Margie standing on the porch, blocking the door. I rushed out, my legs shaky but fueled by adrenaline. "Cora," I shouted. "Get away from my house." She whirled around, her eyes wild. "You can't keep me from him, Lenora. Wyatt needs me." "He doesn't need you," I spat. "He needs peace and healing, something you've never given him." Cora lunged forward, but David caught her arm. "Enough, Cora. It's over." She wrenched away from him, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand. None of you do. I love him." "If you loved him," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "you would let him go." For a moment, Cora seemed to deflate. Then, without warning, she shoved past me, racing for the door. I stumbled, my cane clattering to the ground. "Mom." Wyatt's voice came from inside. He appeared in the doorway, balancing on his crutches, his face a mask of shock and anger. As Cora reached for him, I found strength I didn't know I had. I pushed myself up, stepping between them. "You can't break us," I said, my voice ringing with conviction. "We're stronger without you." Wyatt's hand found mine, squeezing tight. We stood united, facing Cora together. In that moment, I knew we'd reached a turning point. Whatever happened next would define our future. And I was ready to fight for it with everything I had. 6 months had passed since that fateful confrontation with Cora. The leaves were turning golden, a crisp autumn breeze rustling through the trees as Margie and I strolled through the park. My cane was gone, replaced by a newfound strength and balance I'd worked hard to achieve. "I can't believe how far you've come, Lenora," Margie said, beaming with pride. "You're practically running circles around me now." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. "I couldn't have done it without you, Margie. You've been my rock through all of this." As we rounded a corner, I spotted a familiar figure sitting on a bench ahead. My heart skipped a beat. It was Cora. She looked different, thinner, more subdued. When she saw us, her eyes widened with recognition. For a moment, I thought about turning away, avoiding the confrontation. But something in me had changed. I was no longer afraid. "Hello, Cora," I said as we approached. She stood, wringing her hands nervously. "Lenora, I've been hoping to run into you." Margie squeezed my arm supportively as Cora continued. "I wanted to apologize," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For everything. I was selfish and cruel, and I hurt you both so much." I took a deep breath, surprised by the calm that washed over me. "Thank you for saying that, Cora. It means a lot to hear it." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. How is Wyatt?" "He's doing well," I replied. "He's found his footing again. We both have." Cora smiled sadly. "I'm glad. You both deserve happiness." As we parted ways, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, the last remnants of anger and resentment finally fading away. Later that evening, Wyatt and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset. He'd just returned from a successful business trip, his confidence restored and his smile genuine once again. "I saw Cora today," I said softly. Wyatt tensed for a moment, then relaxed. "How was that?" "Surprisingly healing," I admitted. "She apologized. I think she's finally found some peace." Wyatt nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know, Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about how you stood by me through everything." I reached out, squeezing his hand. "That's what family does, sweetheart." "I know," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But it's more than that. You taught me what real strength looks like, what unconditional love really means." Tears welled in my eyes as Wyatt continued. "I've decided to cut back on work," he said. "I want to spend more time here with you. Maybe we could start having those Sunday dinners again, like when Dad was alive." My heart swelled with joy. "I'd love that, Wyatt." As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I marveled at how far we'd come. The road had been rocky, filled with pain and betrayal, but we'd emerged stronger, our bond unbreakable. "We've endured so much," I said, my voice filled with wonder, "but we've emerged stronger." Wyatt smiled, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "That's because we had each other, Mom, and we always will." Just then, Margie's car pulled into the driveway. She waved cheerfully, a bag of takeout in her hand. "Hope you two are hungry," she called out. "I brought enough for an army." As we laughed and welcomed Margie onto the porch, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. We had weathered the storm, faced our demons, and come out the other side. Our family might look different now, but it was stronger than ever. Friendship and family, I realized, were our greatest strengths. They had carried us through the darkest times and would continue to light our way forward. As we settled in for an evening of good food and even better company, I knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, we would face them together. And that was all that mattered. The envelope trembled in my hands, its crisp white edges mocking me with their perfection. I stared at the return address, willing the name to change. It didn't. Josh Turner. My ex-fiancé? You gonna open that, or just glare it to death? Harris, my colleague, leaned against my office doorway, his salt and pepper hair catching the fluorescent light. I tossed the envelope onto my desk. It's probably just junk mail. Harris raised an eyebrow. Junk mail doesn't make you look like you've seen a ghost, Naomi. With a sigh, I tore open the envelope. A gilded card slipped out, adorned with flowing script. My stomach dropped as I read the words. Well, it's a wedding invitation, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Josh is getting married. Harris whistled low. That's rough. You okay? I nodded, not trusting my voice. As Harris retreated, giving me space, I forced myself to read the rest of the invitation. That's when I saw it. The bride's name, Laurel Burke. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone, dialing Josh's number before I could talk myself out of it. He answered on the third ring. Naomi? His voice was cautious, tinged with surprise. Why would your sister not attend her own sister's wedding? I demanded, skipping pleasantries. There was a pause. What are you talking about? The invitation, Josh. Your fiancée, Laurel Burke. Why does she have my last name? Oh. Another pause. She said you two were estranged sisters. That's why she didn't want to invite you, but I insisted. I gripped the phone tighter. We're not family. There's no past that binds us as sisters. Look, Naomi, I don't know what kind of family drama you've got going on, but there is no drama, Josh. I cut him off. I've never had a sister. Laurel is lying to you. Silence stretched between us. Then, I think you should talk to Laurel about this. Fine, I snapped. What's her number? Josh hesitated before rattling off a string of digits. I jotted them down, my handwriting barely legible. Naomi, Josh said softly. I'm sorry if this is bringing up stuff. I just thought you should know. I ended the call without responding, my fingers already dialing Laurel's number. It went straight to voicemail. Laurel, this is Naomi Burke. We need to talk about why you're telling people we're sisters. Call me back. I slammed the phone down, my mind reeling. Who was this woman, and why was she claiming to be my sister? More importantly, why was she marrying Josh? A knock at my door startled me. Harris was back, concern etched on his face. You look like you could use a drink. I nodded, grabbing my purse. As we walked to the elevator, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, Laurel. Stay out of my life, Naomi. You've already ruined enough. I showed Harris the message, my hands shaking. I've never even met her. How could I have ruined anything? Harris's jaw tightened. Sounds like someone's playing games. Dangerous ones. As we stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Josh. Laurel's upset. Says you're trying to sabotage our wedding. What's going on? I stared at the message, my mind racing. What had I stumbled into? And how was I going to untangle this web of lies? The elevator doors opened, and Harris gently guided me out. Come on, he said. Let's figure this out over that drink. As we walked into the crisp evening air, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Something told me that Laurel Burke was about to turn my life upside down, and I had no idea how to stop her. The cafe bustled with the lunch crowd, but I barely noticed as I sat across from Josh, my hands wrapped tightly around a mug of lukewarm coffee. His familiar face, once a source of comfort, now filled me with a mixture of anger and confusion. Naomi, I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this, Josh said, his tone dismissive. So what if Laurel says you're sisters? Why does it matter? I leaned forward, my voice low and intense. It matters because it's a lie, Josh. We're not family. There's no past that binds us as sisters. Josh's eyes narrowed. Are you sure about that? Maybe there's something you don't know. I think I'd know if I had a sister, I snapped. What I want to know is why Laurel is lying to you, and why you're so willing to believe her over me. He shrugged, a gesture that used to drive me crazy during our relationship. Laurel's been nothing but honest with me. Maybe you're the one who's confused. I felt my temper rising. Confused? Josh, I'm telling you the truth. Laurel and I are not related. Why can't you see that she's manipulating you? The way I see it, Josh said, leaning back in his chair, you're just jealous. You can't stand the fact that I've moved on and found someone better. His words hit me like a slap. Better? You think a liar is better? At least she's not constantly nagging me about my career, Josh retorted. Unlike you, Laurel supports my music. I laughed bitterly. Your music? Josh, when was the last time you even picked up a guitar? You gave up on your dreams years ago. His face flushed with anger. You don't know anything about my life anymore, Naomi. Laurel believes in me. She's helping me get back into the scene. And let me guess, she's funding your comeback too? I asked, suddenly seeing the situation with painful clarity. Josh's silence was all the confirmation I needed. God, Josh, I said, shaking my head. Can't you see what's happening? She's using you, just like she's using my name. You're wrong, he insisted, but I could see a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Laurel loves me. She wouldn't lie to me. Then explain why she's pretending to be my sister, I challenged. Ask her about her family, her childhood. I bet she can't give you a straight answer. Josh's phone buzzed and he glanced at it. His face paled slightly. I have to go, he said abruptly, standing up. Laurel's waiting for me. As he turned to leave, I called out, Josh, wait. Just be careful, okay? Something's not right here. He paused, looking back at me with a mixture of emotions I couldn't quite decipher. I'll talk to Laurel, he said finally. But I think you're the one who needs to be careful, Naomi. Don't make accusations you can't back up. I watched him walk away, my mind reeling. As I gathered my things to leave, my phone chimed with a text. It was from Laurel. Stay away from Josh. You had your chance. He's mine now, and I won't let you ruin this for me. A chill ran down my spine. I quickly dialed Harris's number, needing to hear a friendly voice. Harris, it's Naomi. Can you meet me? I think I'm in trouble. As I hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just opened Pandora's box. Laurel's threat echoed in my mind, and I realized with growing dread that this was far from over. Whatever game Laurel was playing, it was clear she saw me as a threat, and I had a sinking feeling that she wouldn't stop until one of us was destroyed. I paced the length of Harris's office, my heels clicking against the polished floor. Harris watched me from behind his desk, concern etched on his face. Naomi, you need to slow down and tell me exactly what happened, he said, his voice steady and calming. I took a deep breath and sank into the chair across from him. It's Laurel. She's threatening me, Harris. And Josh, he's completely under her spell. Harris leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Start from the beginning. I recounted my confrontation with Josh, Laurel's text, and the growing sense of dread in the pit of my stomach. As I spoke, Harris's expression darkened. Laurel's always brought chaos wherever she goes, he muttered. I blinked in surprise. You know her? Harris nodded grimly. We crossed paths a few years ago. She was working as a temp in our legal department. Left quite an impression, and not a good one. What happened? I asked, my curiosity piqued. Let's just say she has a talent for manipulating people and situations to her advantage, Harris replied. She nearly cost us a major client with her schemes. I felt a chill run down my spine. And now she's set her sights on me. But why? What could she possibly gain by pretending to be my sister? Harris's eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of concern and determination. I don't know, but we're going to find out. Naomi, I think it's time you cut ties with Josh and this whole situation. It's not safe. I shook my head. I can't, Harris. If I walk away now, who knows what Laurel might do? She could ruin my reputation, my career. We won't let that happen, Harris assured me, reaching across the desk to squeeze my hand. The gesture sent a flutter through my chest, catching me off guard. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. I know your secret, Naomi. Meet me at Riverside Park at 7 p.m. if you don't want Josh to find out. My hand shook as I showed Harris the message. What secret? I whispered, panic rising in my throat. I don't have any secrets. Harris's jaw clenched. It's a bluff. She's trying to scare you. Well, it's working, I admitted. What should I do? We'll go together, Harris said firmly. I'm not letting you face this alone. As evening fell, Harris and I made our way to Riverside Park. The setting sun cast long shadows across the grass, and a cool breeze rustled the leaves. We found a bench with a clear view of the surrounding area and sat down to wait. At precisely 7 p.m., a figure emerged from the shadows. Laurel. She walked towards us, her face a mask of cool confidence. I said, "Come alone," she sneered, eyeing Harris. "Whatever you have to say to me, you can say in front of Harris," I replied, grateful for his solid presence beside me. Laurel's eyes narrowed. "Fine. Have it your way." She turned to me, her voice dripping with venom. "I know about the money, Naomi, the funds you embezzled from your last job to pay for your mother's rehab." I felt the blood drain from my face. How could she possibly know about that? I'd gone to great lengths to keep it hidden, even from Josh. Harris's hand found mine, squeezing it reassuringly. "That's a serious accusation, Laurel. I hope you have proof to back it up." Laurel smirked. "Oh, I do. And unless Naomi wants it splashed all over the internet, she'll do exactly as I say." I stood up, my legs shaking, but my voice steady. "What do you want from me, Laurel?" Her eyes glittered with malice. I want you to disappear. Leave town, quit your job, and never contact Josh again. If you do, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. As Laurel's ultimatum hung in the air, I realized with growing horror that my past had finally caught up with me, and now it threatened to destroy everything I'd worked so hard to build. The church bells chimed as Harris and I approached the ornate doors. My stomach churned with a mixture of dread and determination. I smoothed my navy blue dress, a stark contrast to the sea of pastels surrounding us. You don't have to do this, Harris murmured, his hand a comforting presence on my lower back. I took a deep breath. Yes, I do. I need answers. We slipped into the back pew just as the wedding march began. Heads turned, curious whispers rippling through the crowd at our late arrival. I ignored them, my eyes fixed on Josh at the altar. He looked nervous, fidgeting with his cufflinks. Then Laurel appeared, a vision in white. Her eyes locked with mine for a brief moment, a flash of triumph in her gaze. I clenched my fists, willing myself to stay calm. The ceremony was a blur of words and rituals. I barely registered the vows, too focused on the way Josh's hands trembled as he slipped the ring onto Laurel's finger. Did he have doubts? Or was I projecting my own unresolved feelings? As the newlyweds made their way down the aisle, Laurel's arm looped possessively through Josh's. I felt a sudden wave of clarity. This wasn't about Josh anymore. It was about uncovering the truth behind Laurel's lies. At the reception, Harris and I kept to ourselves, observing from a corner table. Laurel flitted from guest to guest, her laughter tinkling like shattered glass. Harris muttered, "Watch how she works the room." I nodded, noticing how Laurel subtly guided conversations, always keeping herself at the center of attention. She's been planning this for a long time. Suddenly, Josh appeared at our table, his face flushed from champagne. "Naomi, I'm glad you came," he said, his words slightly slurred. "Can we talk? Alone?" I glanced at Harris, who gave me a reassuring nod. 5 minutes, I told Josh, following him to a quiet alcove. "Why are you really here?" Josh asked, his eyes searching mine. "I could ask you the same thing," I retorted. "Are you happy, Josh? Really happy?" He hesitated, and in that moment I saw a flicker of the man I once loved. I don't know, Laurel, she's intense. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning." "Then why marry her?" I pressed. Josh's expression hardened. "Because she believes in me. She supports my music, unlike you." I laughed bitterly. "Is that what she told you? Josh, I always supported your dreams. It was you who gave up." Before he could respond, Laurel's voice cut through the air. "There you are, darling." She sidled up to Josh, her eyes cold as she regarded me. "Naomi, I'm so glad you could make it. It means so much to have my long-lost sister here." I bristled at her words. "Cut the act, Laurel. We both know we're not sisters." Laurel's smile never wavered. "Oh, Naomi, always so dramatic. Perhaps it's time I shared some family photos with our guests. I'm sure they'd love to see us growing up together." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" She leaned in, her voice a venomous whisper. "I have quite the collection. It's amazing what you can do with Photoshop these days." As she sauntered away, Josh in tow, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Laurel wasn't just lying, she was creating an entire false history. I rushed back to Harris, my mind reeling. "We need to leave. Now." "What happened?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "Laurel's gone too far," I said, my voice shaking. "She's fabricating evidence of our supposed sisterhood. If those photos get out, my reputation, my career, everything could be ruined." Harris stood, his jaw set. "Then we fight back. It's time to uncover who Laurel really is and why she's doing this." As we left the reception, I felt a strange mix of fear and resolve. Laurel had raised the stakes, but she'd also made a critical mistake. In her attempt to trap me, she'd given me the push I needed to dig deeper into her past. "Thanks for opening my eyes, Josh," I muttered as we drove away. "You've done me a favor." The battle lines were drawn. It was time to take control of my narrative and expose Laurel's web of lies, no matter the cost. The reception hall buzzed with chatter and clinking glasses, but all I could focus on was Laurel's venomous glare from across the room. Harris squeezed my hand reassuringly as we made our way to a quiet corner. "We need to leave," I whispered urgently. "Laurel's threatening to release doctored photos of us as sisters. If those get out, my whole life could unravel." Before Harris could respond, Laurel materialized beside us, her white gown rustling ominously. "Enjoying the party, dear sister," she sneered. I straightened my spine, meeting her gaze. "Drop the act, Laurel. We both know the truth." Her eyes narrowed. "Do we? Because I have a lifetime of memories that say otherwise. Memories I'm more than happy to share with everyone here." "You're bluffing," I challenged, but my voice wavered. Laurel's laugh was cold and brittle. "Am I? Let's find out." She turned to address the room, raising her voice. "Everyone, I have a special treat. Childhood photos of my sister Naomi and me." Panic surged through me as Laurel produced a tablet from seemingly nowhere. I lunged for it, but she danced away, tapping the screen with a triumphant smirk. The room fell silent as images flickered to life on the large projection screen. There we were, Laurel and I, smiling arm in arm at a beach, blowing out birthday candles together, posing in matching school uniforms. My heart raced as I recognized backgrounds from my own childhood photos, seamlessly altered to include Laurel. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. I felt the weight of judgmental stares, the silent accusations of deceit. Even Harris looked confused, his brow furrowed as he glanced between me and the screen. "Isn't this lovely?" Laurel cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. So many precious memories. I couldn't breathe. The walls seemed to close in as the magnitude of Laurel's deception hit me. She hadn't just fabricated our relationship, she'd rewritten my entire history. "That's enough." Harris's voice cut through the chaos. He strode to the front of the room, unplugging the projector. "This is a wedding, not a slideshow. Let's get back to celebrating the happy couple." As the guests reluctantly dispersed, Laurel cornered me, her eyes blazing. "Why are you doing this?" I hissed. "What could you possibly gain?" For a moment her mask slipped, revealing a depth of pain and anger I hadn't expected. "You have everything," she spat. "The career, the respect, the man who loves you. I'm just taking what should have been mine." Before I could respond, Josh appeared, looking bewildered. "Laurel, what's going on? Why is Naomi upset?" Laurel's demeanor instantly changed, tears welling in her eyes. "Oh, Josh, Naomi's trying to ruin our special day. She's always been jealous of our relationship." I watched in disbelief as Josh comforted her, shooting me an accusatory glance. The injustice of it all hit me like a physical blow. Why did I ever think Josh's approval mattered? I muttered, more to myself than anyone else. Harris was at my side in an instant, his presence a steadying force. "Naomi, we need to go. This isn't healthy for you." As we turned to leave, Laurel's composure cracked entirely. She lunged at me, tears streaming down her face. "You can't leave. You can't abandon me again." Security intervened, holding Laurel back as she sobbed hysterically. The raw anguish in her voice made me pause. There was something more here, a deeper pain driving her actions. In that moment, I made a decision. I couldn't run from this. Whatever twisted game Laurel was playing, whatever wounds from her past were fueling this obsession, I needed to understand, for my own sake and maybe for hers too. I turned to Harris, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I can't walk away. Not yet. There's more to this story, and I need to uncover the truth." Harris nodded, his eyes filled with concern and something deeper. Admiration, perhaps? "Then we'll face it together. Whatever comes next, you're not alone in this." As we left the chaos of the reception behind, I felt a strange mix of dread and determination. Laurel's breakdown had revealed the depths of her instability, but also hinted at a shared pain I couldn't ignore. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The web of lies surrounding us was about to unravel, and I had to be ready for whatever truths lay beneath. The days following Laurel's wedding meltdown blurred together in a haze of anxiety and sleepless nights. I couldn't shake the image of her tear-stained face, the raw anguish in her voice as she accused me of abandoning her. It didn't make sense, but I knew there was a missing piece to this puzzle. Harris had been my rock through it all, a steady presence as we dug deeper into Laurel's past. We'd discovered she'd changed her name several times, leaving a trail of broken relationships and financial disasters in her wake. But why was she so fixated on me? As I pored over another stack of documents in Harris's office, my phone buzzed. Josh's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Naomi, I need to see you." His voice was urgent, tinged with fear. "It's about Laurel. Please, I don't know who else to turn to." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a nearby park. Harris insisted on coming with me, his protective instincts on high alert. Josh was already there when we arrived, pacing nervously. He looked haggard, nothing like the confident man I'd once loved. "What's going on, Josh?" I asked, keeping my distance. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Laurel's gone off the deep end. She's been ranting about you, about how you stole her life. I found plans in her notebook, detailed plans about ruining your career, your reputation. She's obsessed, Naomi." My blood ran cold. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I finally realized how wrong I've been," Josh's voice cracked. "About everything, about you, about Laurel. I've been such a fool." As he spoke, memories flooded back. The constant criticism, the subtle put-downs, the way he'd slowly chipped away at my self-esteem during our relationship. I felt a surge of anger, not just at Josh, but at myself for allowing it for so long. "It's easier to promise the moon when you're cornered, isn't it, Josh?" I said bitterly. He flinched at my words. "I know I hurt you, Naomi. I was selfish and manipulative. But please, you have to believe me about Laurel. She's dangerous." Before I could respond, Harris stepped forward. "We appreciate the warning, Josh, but I think it's time you step back and let Naomi move on with her life." Josh's eyes widened as he looked between us, realization dawning. "You two are together?" Harris finished, taking my hand. "And I won't let anyone hurt Naomi again. Not Laurel, and not you." As we turned to leave, Josh called out desperately, "I still love you, Naomi. I know I don't deserve it, but please, give me another chance." I froze, a whirlwind of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Part of me, the part that still ached from our shared history, wanted to believe him. But as I looked at Harris, steady and supportive beside me, I knew what I had to do. "No, Josh," I said firmly. "What we had is over. I've moved on, and it's time you did too." We walked away, leaving Josh standing alone in the fading sunlight. As we reached the car, my phone chimed with a text. Unknown number. "I warned you to stay away, sister dear. Now you'll pay. Check your email." With shaking hands, I opened my inbox. There, sent to everyone in my contact list, including my boss and colleagues, were documents detailing the embezzlement from my previous job, the secret I'd buried so deeply, the mistake I'd made out of desperation to help my mother. "Oh God," I whispered, showing Harris the screen. "She's ruined everything." Harris pulled me close. "We'll fight this, Naomi. Together. I promise you, we'll find a way through." But as the weight of Laurel's revenge settled over me, I couldn't help but wonder if this was a battle I could win. My career, my reputation, my future, everything I'd worked so hard for was crumbling around me. And somewhere out there, Laurel was watching, reveling in the chaos she'd created. The final showdown was coming, and I knew that only one of us would be left standing when the dust settled. The world around me crumbled as I stared at my phone, Laurel's vengeful email burning into my retinas. My career, my reputation, everything I'd worked so hard for was in jeopardy. Harris's arm around my shoulders felt like the only thing keeping me from collapsing. "We need to get ahead of this," Harris said, his voice steady despite the storm raging around us. "Let's go to your office. We'll talk to HR, explain the situation." I nodded numbly, allowing him to guide me to the car. The drive to the office was a blur, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. As we stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed again. "Josh." "Naomi, please, I need to see you. It's urgent." I showed Harris the message, my hand trembling. "What should I do?" He frowned. "It could be a trap. Laurel might be using him to get to you." "Or he might have information that could help," I countered, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. "I need to know, Harris. I need to end this." Reluctantly, he agreed, and we arranged to meet Josh at a nearby coffee shop. When we arrived, Josh was already there, looking haggard and desperate. "Naomi, thank God," he said, standing as we approached. "Laurel's gone. She emptied our accounts and disappeared, I think she might be coming for you." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean, coming for me?" Josh's eyes darted nervously around the cafe. "I found her journals. She's been planning this for years, Naomi. The wedding, the fake sisterhood, it was all part of some twisted revenge plot. She blames you for something that happened in her past, something about her real sister." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. "The temp job," I whispered. 5 years ago, I was on the hiring committee. We didn't choose her sister for a position. She was devastated." "And now she's out to destroy you," Harris finished, his jaw clenched. Josh nodded miserably. "I'm so sorry, Naomi. I should have seen through her lies." I was weak and I let her manipulate me, but I want to make it right. Please let me help you stop her. For a moment I saw a glimmer of the man I once loved, vulnerable, sincere. But as I looked at Harris, steady and supportive beside me, I knew there was no going back. I appreciate the warning, Josh, I said softly, but this isn't your fight anymore. Please forget about me, forever. It's time we both moved on. The hurt in his eyes was palpable, but I stood firm. As Josh left, shoulders slumped in defeat, I turned to Harris. We need to find Laurel before she does any more damage. Just then, my phone chimed with a new email. My breath caught as I read the subject line, "Your mother says hello, sister dear." With shaking hands, I opened the message. There was a photo of my estranged mother, Grace, bound and gagged in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. The message below chilled me to the bone. "Time to face your past, Naomi. Come alone to the address below, or Mommy Dearest pays the price for your sins." I showed Harris the screen, my mind reeling. "She has my mother. I have to go." Harris gripped my shoulders, his eyes intense. "Not alone. We'll call the police. No, I cut him off. "You don't know Laurel. She'll hurt my mother if I don't play by her rules. I have to do this myself." "Naomi, please," Harris pleaded. "Let me help you. We can face this together." I cupped his face in my hands, memorizing every line and curve. "I love you, Harris, but this is my battle to fight. I need to end this once and for all." Before he could protest further, I turned and ran, hailing a taxi and leaving Harris behind. As the city blurred past the windows, I steeled myself for the confrontation ahead. Laurel had taken everything from me, my past, my present, and now she threatened my future. But I was done being a victim. It was time to reclaim my life, no matter the cost. The taxi pulled up to a dilapidated warehouse on the outskirts of town. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out, ready to face my tormentor and end this nightmare once and for all. The warehouse loomed before me, a hulking shadow against the twilight sky. My heart raced as I pushed open the rusted door, stepping into the gloom. "Laurel?" I called out, my voice echoing in the cavernous space. "I'm here. Let my mother go." A chilling laugh rang out, and Laurel emerged from the shadows, her eyes wild with a manic gleam. Behind her I saw my mother, Grace, bound to a chair, fear etched across her face. "Welcome home, sister?" Laurel sneered. "Ready to pay for what you've done?" "Laurel, please," I pleaded, inching closer. "Whatever happened in the past, we can talk about it. Just let my mother go." She laughed bitterly. "Talk? Like you talked to my sister before crushing her dreams? Do you even remember her, Naomi? Sarah Jacobs, the girl you rejected for that job 5 years ago?" The memory hit me like a physical blow. Sarah, a bright-eyed candidate, devastated by our decision. I'm sorry. We had no idea." "Sorry doesn't cut it," Laurel screamed, brandishing a gun. "Sarah killed herself because of you, and now you're going to feel that same pain." Time seemed to slow as Laurel turned the gun towards my mother. Without thinking, I lunged forward, tackling Laurel to the ground. We grappled fiercely, the gun between us. A deafening bang echoed through the warehouse. For a moment, everything was still. Then warmth spread across my side. I looked down to see crimson blooming on my shirt. "No!" Laurel's anguished cry pierced the air. She scrambled back, the gun clattering to the floor. I didn't mean." Suddenly, the warehouse doors burst open. Harris rushed in, followed by police officers. "Naomi!" he cried, racing to my side. As the officers subdued Laurel, Harris cradled me in his arms. "Stay with me, love," he whispered, pressing his hand to my wound. "Help is coming." Through the haze of pain, I saw my mother being untied, tears streaming down her face. "Naomi, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "For everything." I reached out, grasping her hand. "It's okay, Mom. We'll make it right." As paramedics swarmed around us, I locked eyes with Laurel one last time. The hatred in her gaze had melted away, replaced by a look of shocked remorse. In that moment, I saw not a monster, but a broken woman consumed by grief. "I forgive you," I whispered, not sure if she could hear me. But I needed to say it. For her, for Sarah, and for myself. The world faded to black as I was lifted onto a stretcher. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital room, Harris dozing in a chair beside me. Sunlight streamed through the window, a new day dawning. As Harris stirred, his eyes lighting up at seeing me awake, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. "I've finally seen the light," I murmured, squeezing his hand. "All thanks to you." He leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead. "We made it through together," he said softly, "and we'll face whatever comes next the same way." In the days that followed, as I recovered and the legal proceedings against Laurel began, I found myself reflecting on the tangled web that had brought us all to this point. Josh, humbled by his mistakes, reached out to make amends before moving across the country for a fresh start. My mother and I began the slow process of rebuilding our relationship, years of misunderstandings finally being addressed. And Laurel, facing the consequences of her actions, started the long journey towards healing and redemption. I visited her once before the trial, offering forgiveness and encouraging her to seek help. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary, for both of us. As Harris and I stood on the balcony of our new apartment, watching the sun set on another day, I felt a sense of hope I hadn't experienced in years. The shadows of the past were finally receding, making way for a brighter future. "Ready for our new beginning?" Harris asked, wrapping his arms around me. I smiled, leaning into his embrace. "More than ready. It's time to write our own story, together." As the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I had the strength to face them. The web of shadows had been untangled, and in its place a tapestry of love, forgiveness, and second chances was being woven. At last, I was truly home. "I don't know what my son sees in you. You'll never be good enough for him. Leave before you ruin more lives," Warren snarled, his eyes narrowing as they bore into me across the dinner table. My hands trembled, clinking my fork against the plate. "What did I ever do to you?" I managed to stammer, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just being you was enough," he retorted coldly, not even blinking. The tension in the air was suffocating. Jaden sat beside me, his jaw clenched and face pale. I glanced at him, hoping for support, but he seemed as stunned as I was. Warren's words cut through the jovial atmosphere we had started with when we first arrived. Now it felt like those words were crumbling around us. It had been a typical family dinner, or so I thought. Jaden's mother, Diana, had filled our plates with roast chicken and mashed potatoes, while his sister, Mallory, chatted about her latest project at work. Things were going well until Warren decided to speak his mind. "Elena, don't let him get to you," Mallory murmured from across the table, her voice a soft plea. Warren shot her a withering look. "Mallory, stay out of this. You have no idea what kind of woman she really is." Jaden finally found his voice. "Dad, that's enough." His voice was firm but tinged with a shaky anger. I could see him wrestling with his loyalty towards his father and his love for me. Warren ignored him. "You think she loves you? She's after your money. Doesn't matter how long she plays this game, it's always the same. A gold digger." "Stop it, Warren." Diana's voice quivered. She reached out to touch her husband's arm, but he brushed her aside. "Mom, Dad, this is not fair," Jaden said, standing up, trying to get between us. "I love Elena, and she loves me." Warren scoffed. "Love? You're naive, Jaden. You think a woman like her at her age isn't looking for financial security?" I felt my face burn with anger and humiliation. "I have a career. I've worked hard for everything I have. I don't need Jaden's money." Warren's laughter was dry and sharp. "Sure, keep telling yourself that, but we all know the truth." Jaden's fists clenched at his sides. "Dad, that's enough." His voice was louder now, echoing in the dining room. "If you can't accept Elena, then maybe we shouldn't come here anymore." Warren's eyes gleamed with a cold satisfaction, like he'd achieved what he set out to do. "Maybe you shouldn't." I rose from my seat, feeling a sharp sting of betrayal. "I think it's time we leave," I said softly, grabbing my coat from the back of the chair. Jaden grabbed his car keys, his face set in a hard line. "Yeah, let's go." We walked out of the house, the door closing firmly behind us. The night air was chilly, matching the iciness that settled in my heart. As we reached the car, Jaden stopped and turned to me. "I'm so sorry, Elena. I didn't think he'd be this way." I looked at him, feeling a mix of sadness and love. "It's not your fault, Jaden. But what are we going to do?" "I don't know," he admitted, the hopelessness in his voice breaking my heart. As we drove away, I couldn't shake Warren's words from my mind. Was this the beginning of a rift too deep to mend? The night felt darker than it should, and the road ahead seemed long and uncertain. The night after dinner at Warren's, I laid awake, staring at the ceiling. The humiliation from Warren's words stung deeper than I wanted to admit. Jaden was beside me, fast asleep, his breathing steady. I envied his ability to shut everything out, even if just temporarily. The next morning, I sipped my coffee in silence as Jaden sat across from me, his face clouded with worry. "Elena?" he started, unsure of how to continue. I put my cup down, looking at him. "You don't need to say it. Your father has made his feelings very clear, Jaden. What I don't understand is why. He's just protective," Jaden sighed, rubbing his temple. "He thinks everyone is out to take advantage of us." "That still doesn't justify his behavior," I replied, feeling a sharp edge in my voice. "I know." Jaden looked defeated, "but he has this way of making me doubt everything." I stood up, pacing the kitchen. The wooden floor creaked under my feet. "Jaden, you know me. You know I'm not looking for anything but a life with you. Why is that so hard for him to accept?" Jaden stood and took my hand. "I believe you, I do. But Dad, he's not easy to change." My phone buzzed with a notification. A text from Mallory. "Hey, can we meet up? Need to talk about last night." I glanced at Jaden and showed him the message. "Go," he said, dropping my hand. "Maybe she can provide some insight." I met Mallory at a small cafe downtown. She looked anxious, her fingers tapping on the table as I sat down. "Elena, I'm so sorry for how Dad treated you," she began, her voice shaky. "He's always been this way ever since—" "Ever since when?" I asked, leaning forward. "Ever since Uncle Leonard came back into our lives," she admitted, looking over her shoulder as if expecting Warren to appear. "What do you mean?" I asked, puzzled. "Leonard has always been the schemer, stirring up trouble. Dad became more paranoid and controlling when Leonard returned from overseas." She ran a hand through her hair. "I think they're plotting something against you." "Why would they do that?" I whispered, despite myself. "Because they believe if they push you away, Jaden will stay loyal to the family business." My heart sank. "So it's about control and power?" Mallory nodded. "Dad thinks Jaden will choose the family over you? And Leonard, well, he just enjoys the games." "Thanks for telling me," I said, squeezing her hand. "But this just makes everything even more complicated." "I'll help in any way I can," Mallory promised. "But I need to be careful. If Dad finds out I'm helping you—" "I understand," I assured her. "We need to be smart about this." Driving back home, I mulled over Mallory's words. Warren wasn't just worried about me as a person. He saw me as a threat to his control. And Leonard? He thrived on deceit and manipulation. Opening the front door, I found Jaden waiting, the worry lines on his forehead deepening. "What did Mallory say?" I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Warren and Uncle Leonard are working together. They see me as a threat. It's about control, Jaden. They fear losing you to anything outside their influence." Jaden's face darkened, anger flickering in his eyes. "I can't believe they're going this far." "We need to be strong," I said, taking his hand. "We need to stand together." Jaden nodded. "We will, Elena. We'll fight this. Together." Looking into his eyes, I knew the road ahead would be challenging, but we would face it side by side. We wouldn't let Warren's manipulation destroy us. A week passed, and the tension between Jaden and his family showed no signs of easing. I tried to focus on my work, but the anxiety lingered like a shadow. Every vibration of my phone made my heart skip, fearing another attack from Warren or Leonard. One evening, Jaden arrived home, looking more stressed than usual. "Dad's not stopping," he said, dropping his briefcase on the couch. "He's enlisted Uncle Leonard to dig up dirt on you." My stomach churned. "Great, just what we needed," I muttered, sinking into the chair. Jaden sat next to me. "We need to be careful, Elena. Leonard is known for his dirty tactics." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Mallory. "Heads up, Leonard and Dad are spreading rumors about you to the family. Stay strong." I showed the message to Jaden. "They're really pulling out all the stops." Jaden's face hardened. "I won't let them do this to you, to us." Just then, the doorbell rang. Jaden opened it to reveal Leonard standing there, a smug look on his face. "Hello, nephew," Leonard said smoothly. "Mind if I come in?" Jaden's jaw tightened. "What do you want, Leonard?" Leonard glanced at me, feigning surprise. "Oh, is this a bad time?" "This isn't a social call, and you know it," I said, stepping forward to stand beside Jaden. Leonard smirked. "Well, since you're here, Elena, let me be blunt. You're not welcome in our family." "Get to the point, Leonard," Jaden snapped. "Warren and I have been talking," Leonard continued, "and we think it's in everyone's best interest if Elena steps away from the family and from you, Jaden." "You can't be serious," Jaden said, his voice trembling with anger. Leonard shrugged. We're completely serious. She's a liability. The rumors, well, they're gaining traction. Even your mother is starting to have doubts. I felt a surge of anger. These lies won't destroy us, Leonard. We'll see about that, Leonard said, his eyes glinting. You might find that fighting against family is more than you can handle. Jaden took a step closer to Leonard. You're playing a dangerous game. I won't stand by and let you ruin our lives. Leonard chuckled. Family comes first, Jaden. Always has, always will. Think about it. With that, he turned and walked out. Jaden slammed the door shut, his face red with frustration. You okay? I asked, reaching for his hand. He shook his head. I hate them for this. How could they do this to their own family? We'll get through it, I assured him. We just need to stay one step ahead. The next few days were a blur of whispered conversations and sideways glances from Jaden's extended family. Rumors spread like wildfire, accusations about my past, lies about my intentions. Even at work, I could feel the cold stares from coworkers who'd heard the gossip. Meeting Mallory in secret became our only way to stay informed. They're painting you as a manipulative gold digger, she said one afternoon, her eyes filled with regret. They're relentless. But why? I asked, frustrated. Why go through so much trouble? They think it's the only way to keep control, she answered softly. They're trying to protect the family business. They don't care who gets hurt along the way. I won't let them win, Mallory, I vowed. The line between family and enemy had been drawn. Warren and Leonard's actions were setting the stage for a confrontation that was brewing just beneath the surface. Jaden and I were determined to stand united, even as the storm clouds gathered overhead. These battles weren't just about us anymore. They revealed the lengths people would go to for power and control. But no matter what, we would fight back together. The tension was almost unbearable. Each day at work was fraught with whispered rumors and sidelong glances. Jaden and I tried to keep our heads down, but the pressure was mounting. Warren and Leonard's influence had far-reaching consequences. Even Mallory started to distance herself, fearing repercussions. One night, Jaden came home looking exhausted. His tie was askew, and he threw his jacket over the chair. Dad ambushed me at the office today, he said, rubbing his temple. I approached him, concerned. What happened? He tried to interrogate me about our relationship. He's convinced you're hiding something. Jaden's voice was filled with frustration. Did you tell him anything? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Of course not. But he doesn't believe me. He's convinced you're not who you say you are. And Leonard? He's too good at what he does. We need to do something, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We can't just sit back and let them tear us apart. Jaden nodded. I know, but I feel stuck. Every time I try to talk to him, it just gets worse. The next morning, I decided I'd had enough. I texted Warren, asking for a meeting. Jaden was hesitant, but he finally agreed. Just be careful, he warned. I arrived at Warren's office, my heart pounding. The receptionist led me into a large, imposing room where Warren sat behind a massive desk. He didn't even look up as I entered. You wanted to see me? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Warren finally looked up, his gaze icy. So you've decided to confront the dragon in his den? I ignored his sarcasm. We need to put an end to this, Warren. Your manipulation is tearing us apart. He leaned back in his chair, a cruel smile curling his lips. I'm only protecting my family, something you know nothing about. You're not protecting anyone, I shot back. You're controlling and destroying relationships. Warren stood, his eyes flashing with anger. You think you can just come into my family and take what you want? You're nothing, a nobody. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I love Jaden, and he loves me. You can't change that with lies and manipulation. You're delusional, Warren sneered. Jaden will come around. He'll see the truth about you. He already knows the truth, I replied firmly, and he's chosen me. Warren's face darkened. You don't belong here. Leave now, and maybe things will settle down. Otherwise, you're going to regret you ever stepped into this family. I left his office with my heart racing, but my resolve strengthened. I wouldn't let Warren intimidate me. When I got home, Jaden was waiting. How did it go? He asked anxiously. Not well, I admitted. He's not backing down. Jaden paced the room, fists clenching and unclenching. We can't keep living like this, Alina. Maybe we should take a break. Let things cool down. I felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I need time to think," Jaden said, his voice breaking. "We're under so much pressure. I can't think straight." "Jaden, please," I pleaded. "Don't let them win. We can fight this together." "I don't know if I can," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Alina." He left that night, deciding to stay at a friend's place for a while. As the door closed behind him, I felt a cold, numb sensation creeping over me. Warren's plan was working, and I was losing the one person who mattered most. Jaden's decision to take a break hit me like a ton of bricks. Each day without him was a struggle. The house felt empty and cold, every corner reminding me of what I was losing. I barely slept, my mind racing with thoughts about Warren and Leonard's relentless scheming. One evening, unable to sit idle any longer, I decided to dig through my own files and emails, hoping to find something to counter Warren and Leonard's lies. Hours passed with nothing. Frustration gnawed at me until I stumbled upon an email chain that caught my attention. Sent to an unfamiliar address, it was filled with malicious intent and vivid descriptions of plans to eliminate me from Jaden's life. My heart raced as I realized the sender was Leonard, and the recipient was Warren. The messages detailed their relentless plot to sow discord and manipulate Jaden. I immediately called Mallory, my voice shaking. "Mallory, I found something. You have to see it." We met at a coffee shop, and I showed her the emails on my laptop. Her face paled as she read through them. This is insane, Alina. They're worse than I thought." "We have to show this to Jaden," I said. Mallory nodded. "Let me reach out to him. Maybe he'll listen to me." Later that evening, Mallory texted me, "Jaden's coming over. Be ready." When Jaden arrived, his face was tense and tired. "Mallory said you found something?" I nodded, leading him to the kitchen where my laptop was set up. "It's better if you see for yourself." He read the emails, his expression shifting from confusion to shock, then to a slow-burning rage. "These are from Dad and Leonard? About you?" "Yes," I said softly. "They've been manipulating you, Jaden. This is proof." Jaden's hands trembled as he closed the laptop. "All this time, I can't believe they would go this far." I took a step towards him. "Jaden, we can fight this together, but you need to see what they're really doing." He nodded, his eyes brimming with determination. "You're right. We need to confront them. This can't go on." We decided to face Warren and Leonard together, arranging a meeting at Warren's house. Mallory insisted on coming along for support. The tension as we walked into the house was palpable. Warren and Leonard sat in the living room, looking smug and confident. "So you've come to your senses, Jaden?" Warren asked, a sneer playing on his lips. Jaden's voice was firm. "We know what you've been doing, Dad, manipulating, trying to tear us apart." Warren's expression didn't falter. "I've done what's best for you, Jaden." Jaden slammed the laptop on the table, opening the incriminating emails. "This is what's best for me? Lies and manipulation?" Leonard leaned forward, his smile fading. "You don't understand." "No, you don't understand," Jaden interrupted. "You've lost my trust, and you won't get it back." Warren's eyes narrowed. "Elena is poisoning you against us." "This is your doing, not hers," Jaden shot back. "We're done with your games." Mallory finally stepped forward, her voice steady. "I support Jaden and Elena. You two are toxic, and it's time we all saw it." Warren's face contorted with fury, but he said nothing. Jaden took my hand, his grip reassuring. "We're leaving, and we won't be coming back." As we walked out, I felt a surge of relief. Warren and Leonard's hold on Jaden had broken, and together we were stronger. It wouldn't be easy, but we had exposed their deceit. The road to healing had begun, and for the first time in weeks, I felt hopeful about the future. Jaden and I spent the next few days gathering our strength. We knew the confrontation had just begun. Armed with the truth, we set a plan in motion to reveal Warren and Leonard's deceit to the entire family. We decided to call a family meeting at Jaden's parents' house, ensuring that the extended family would be present. Jaden invited everyone, making it clear that this was a matter of urgency. Warren and Leonard might have thought they could manipulate the situation, but this time we would control the narrative. The family gathered in the large living room, filled with murmurs of confusion and curiosity. Warren and Leonard sat in their usual chairs, their faces steely and unreadable. Jaden stood beside me, gripping my hand for support. "Thank you all for coming," Jaden began, his voice strong. We have something important to discuss. For weeks, Elena and I have been victims of lies and manipulation orchestrated by my father and uncle. A murmur ran through the room. Warren leaned forward, a sneer on his face. This again, Jaden? Haven't we had enough of this nonsense? It's not nonsense, Jaden replied, his voice unwavering. He turned to Mallory, who stood up and began playing the emails on the big screen. Silence fell over the room as Leonard's and Warren's voices filled the room, their cold, calculating words undeniable. The shock on the family's faces was evident, and whispers of disbelief spread like wildfire. How could you do this? Jaden's aunt muttered, glaring at Warren. Warren's face turned red with rage. You think this proves anything? It's all taken out of context. Context, Jaden's voice rose. You manipulated and lied to push Elena out of my life. This isn't love or protection, it's control and deceit. Leonard tried to interject. We were protecting the family, Jaden. Sometimes harsh measures are necessary. Harsh measures? Mallory snapped. This is cruelty, plain and simple. Jaden's mother, Diana, stood up, her face pale. Warren, is this true? Have you been lying to all of us? Warren looked around, his confidence wavering. I did what I thought was right, but Jaden, he's blinded by her. She's not one of us. Jaden's voice shook with emotion. Elena is more family to me than you've ever been since this started. She didn't deserve any of this. Warren stuttered, but Jaden cut him off. Enough. I'm done with your lies. This ends now. The room was tense, every eye on Warren and Leonard. Jaden turned to the family. From this day forward, we cut ties with them. Their influence ends here. We rebuild without lies. Diana, with tears in her eyes, nodded. I'm so sorry, Jaden, Elena. I didn't know it had gone this far. Jaden squeezed my hand. We're moving forward as a family, but only with those who support us, who value truth. Warren stood up, his face contorted with fury. You're making a big mistake, Jaden. No, Jaden replied, his voice steady. For the first time, I'm making the right choice. As Warren and Leonard left the room, the weight of their influence seemed to lift. The family began to rally around us, offering apologies and support. Jaden drew me close, his arm around my shoulders. We did it, I whispered, feeling a sense of relief washing over me. Jaden nodded, his eyes determined. This is just the beginning. Together, we can face anything. The reckoning had come, and while the road ahead was still uncertain, we knew we'd taken the first step towards a future free from deceit. With every obstacle overcome, our bond grew stronger, proving that love and truth would always prevail. As the door closed behind Warren and Leonard, a heavy silence descended on the room. The air felt charged with the weight of everything that had happened. Jaden and I stood together, still processing the enormity of what we'd just done. Diana approached us, her face lined with worry. Jaden, Elena, I had no idea they were capable of this. I'm so sorry. Jaden sighed, his shoulders relaxing slightly for the first time in weeks. It's not your fault, Mom, but we need to move forward. Mallory stepped in, her eyes resolute. Rebuilding won't be easy, but we can do it, together. Jaden nodded. First, we need to make sure Warren and Leonard can't harm us any further. Their influence needs to end, both in the family and in the business. I turned to Jaden, my voice steady. We will, Jaden. We'll figure this out. The next morning, Jaden and I began the process of distancing ourselves from Warren's business. It was clear that to reclaim our lives, we needed to establish independence. I decided to dive back into my marketing career, focusing on what I had built for myself before all this chaos. Meanwhile, Jaden started exploring opportunities to start his own enterprise. Each evening, we sat together, discussing ideas, plans, and the future we envisioned without the shadow of Warren's control. One late afternoon, Jaden came home, his face lit with excitement. I found a potential investor for a new project. This could be a fresh start for us. I smiled, proud of his determination. That's amazing, Jaden. Let's make it happen. We met the investor, an old friend of Jaden's, who was eager to support his vision. As plans solidified, it felt like a burden lifting off our shoulders, replaced by a sense of purpose and hope. Amidst all this, one evening, Diana called, her voice filled with a newfound resolve. Jaden, I think it's time we talked about your father. I need to explain why he's become so bitter. Jaden and I visited Diana the following weekend. She welcomed us into the home that had seen so much turmoil, her expression both sad and determined. Warren wasn't always like this, Diana began, her voice soft. There was a time when he was full of hope, just like you, Jaden. But life has a way of hardening people. What changed him? Jaden asked, leaning forward. Diana took a deep breath. It was Leonard's return from overseas. Warren had always felt a duty to protect the family, but Leonard's influence made it worse. He stirred up old insecurities, convinced Warren that everyone was out to take from him. It turned him into this controlling figure obsessed with power. I listened, feeling a pang of empathy despite everything Warren had done. That kind of fear can destroy people, I said quietly. Yes, Diana agreed. Doubt and fear consumed him, and he took it out on those he should have loved the most. Jaden's face was filled with a mix of anger and sadness. He's hurt us all so much. I know, Diana said, tears in her eyes, but understanding his past doesn't excuse his actions. It just helps us see the full picture. Jaden nodded, reaching for my hand. We won't let his past dictate our future. We're carving out our own path now. In the weeks that followed, Jaden's new venture began to take shape. We poured our energy into creating a future built on trust and mutual support. Mallory, freed from Warren's oppressive influence, found her own voice, contributing to the family in ways she'd been too scared to before. Despite the confrontation and the revelations, healing had begun. Warren and Leonard's fall from power left a void, but it also provided an opportunity for growth. We were no longer defined by the bitterness that had once threatened to tear us apart. As Jaden and I stood together, looking towards the horizon, we knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But for the first time, it felt like our own. And that made all the difference. Warren's fall was more profound than anyone could have anticipated. Once a titan of influence, he now found himself ostracized by both his immediate and extended family. Word of his and Leonard's manipulations spread quickly, turning allies into skeptics and friends into critics. Jaden and I watched from a distance as Warren's once impenetrable empire began to crumble. He had alienated everyone who mattered, and now he was paying the price. It was hard not to feel a mix of satisfaction and pity. One evening, as we were settling into our new routine, Jaden received an unexpected call from his mother. Her voice was heavy with concern. "Jaden, it's your father. He's not handling this well. Can you come over?" Jaden looked at me, uncertainty in his eyes. "Should we go?" I nodded. "He's still your father. Let's see what's going on." When we arrived, Diana led us into the living room where Warren sat, staring blankly at the wall. His once sharp and commanding demeanor was now a shadow of its former self. "Jaden, Elena," Warren said, his voice lifeless. "I suppose you've come to see the defeated king." "Dad," Jaden began, almost pleading, "this didn't have to be this way. You pushed everyone away." Warren's eyes hardened momentarily. "I did what I thought was right, for the family." "And look where it's gotten you," I said, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "You hurt so many people, including your own children." Diana touched Warren's arm gently. "It's time to let go of this thirst for control, Warren. It's destroying you." For a moment, the old Warren seemed to surface, his eyes flashing with the stubborn pride that had defined him for so long. But it faded quickly, leaving behind a man broken by his own machinations. Jaden took a deep breath. "Dad, you need to understand that we're moving forward without your influence. We're creating our own lives now." Warren looked at Jaden, truly seeing him for perhaps the first time in years. "I just wanted to protect you." "By manipulating and deceiving us?" Jaden shook his head. "That's not protection, Dad. That's control, and it's over." We left Warren's house that evening with a sense of finality. The old power structures had fallen, and in their place, we were building something new and honest. Mallory, emboldened by the changes, finally stepped out of the shadows. She openly supported Jaden, cutting ties with the toxic patriarchy that had held them captive for so long. Her transformation was inspiring, and it further solidified our resolve to pursue a life free from manipulation. Jaden's new business started to gain traction, and my career continued to flourish. We found a balance, supporting each other in ways that strengthened our relationship. Trust and communication became the cornerstones of our lives, our bond reaffirmed through every challenge we faced. One crisp autumn afternoon, Jaden and I sat in our new home, planning our future. The past months had been a whirlwind, but we had emerged stronger and more united. "Do you think he'll ever change?" I asked, referring to Warren. Jaden looked thoughtful. I don't know, but we can't wait around for him to. We have our own lives to lead. I nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and peace. We've come a long way, Jaden. Yes, we have, he agreed, taking my hand in his. And we'll keep moving forward, no matter what. The journey had been tumultuous, but we had found our footing. We reclaimed our lives from under Warren's shadow, turning manipulation and deceit into lessons of resilience and hope. The future was ours, a tapestry of love, trust, and unbreakable unity, free from the venom of a bitter lineage. Together, we had triumphed.